Doctor Who is back. Season 2, big premiere. The robot revolution, new companion in Belinda. The 15th Doctor is back. New season airing. Everything's happening. We're going to talk about 3 things in this discussion. Firstly, most of the discussion is going to be about this episode itself, the robot revolution. Then the 3 of us are going to have a talk about kind of the vibes of the show right now, because I think there's a weird sort of vibe in 2025 surrounding Doctor Who for all sorts of reasons, so we'll dig into that. And then we're going to talk about leaks for the rest of Season 2. We'll go into those in detail and talk about what's the go there, veracity-wise, and in terms of what they're actually describing. We'll go through that. So 3 kind of separate discussions here. First one on Robot Revolution, second one, Season 2 vibes. And then at the end it leaks. You can tune out of that bit if you want, because the first 2 parts of the discussion will be the 3 of us, myself, Neo from Australia, joined by Ingiga from England and Missy from New Zealand. And then Missy will bow out in the leak section because they don't want to hear that stuff. They're preserving their ears. So let's start by talking the robot revolution. What did you guys think of the episode?
I've been trying to answer this since I watched it, because my initial response was that I didn't like it, but then thinking about it, there were lots of things I did like, so I had to go back, and I thought it was okay.
I think in my case, it feels like maybe another case of it being a bit less than the sum of its parts. Like, again, you can see lots of individual bits that are funny and charming or like interesting, but I think the overall underlying structure is incredibly slight. I felt maybe some of the slightest RTD has ever done, because I think as soon as you start to look at what actually happens in this story, you find there's not a lot. So yeah, kind of weak in certain areas.
Yeah, I liked it, but it felt very slight. But I guess it was more of a real premiere. When you think about the Church on Ruby Road and Space Babies had that awkward thing of, is the Christmas special the premiere? Is episode 1 the premiere? And we've had that in a few other series of Doctor Who. But this felt very much like Joy to the World was its own thing, and now we're starting an actual season. It's an actual companion intro episode. I guess that's the main point of the episode, is the new companion. What did we think of her?
I was about to say I love her. I want to really love her. There's lots of things I like about her. I like the performance, and I really like her attitude and her personality. But I am feeling, it's just that sometimes I can feel that like some of the lines she gets don't feel like they're written for her. They're written for the sake of the plot. And so it takes me out of it, which I didn't have with Ruby. So I don't feel I like her as much. And I'm worried that like I'm going to like her less over the course of the series. So I'm hoping, I like her a lot, and I'm hoping to continue to like her and like her even more.
Yeah, I like her attitude. And, you know, when the Doctor says timey-wimey to her and she's like, am I 6? You know, I like the idea of having a companion who, again, is a bit more mature rather than kind of usual sort of, you know, very young sort of teenage girl kind of archetypal kind of companion. You know, I like that aspect. You know, I like her pushing back on the Doctor and those kind of obvious things. But I do also feel like something about how she's conceived is, again, a little bit sketchy. Because, for example, take her being a nurse. I felt like the script would kind of remember she's a nurse for like one scene, then go like a really long stretch in the episode, then have another scene where we just emphasize like 100 times that she's a nurse, guys, she's a nurse, she's totally a nurse, I totally know what a nurse character would act like. And then we sort of turn that off again for the rest of the episode. So it's like, that something feels a bit thin about it. Like the idea of her having like a coherent, like firmly established home life or like personal life or interior world, it feels rather like by signaling really heavily at one point that she's a nurse. So she gets in the hospital bit and she starts doing nursey stuff. That's kind of that's it, basically. And it doesn't quite feel entirely believable to me. You know, it just feels a bit like just everything about her at the moment feels kind of sketchy. Just a few like notes written down on like a bit of paper, like a very quick sort of brief or outline of who this character is, and not like a great deal. And it just feels like compared to Ruby, who in her first episode we started very much with Ruby's whole journey, what Ruby's life is like, Ruby's world, you know, Carla, you know, her family, those things that kind of drive Ruby in life. And we started with all of that with Ruby. And obviously that fell apart hugely over the course of the season. But, it was still very much Ruby felt centered in the story. Whereas something about Belinda does just feel, unfortunately, a little bit like we needed a companion for this slot. So I just quickly came up with one at the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting because this is the first RTD companion without a family that we like not a huge part of their first episode and presumably series. And it's possible he might feel a little bit at sea with that because there are like things about Belinda are sketched in. We see her at the hospital at the beginning, and then we see her home life, a glimpse of her home life, and like they're not like none of it's bad, but yeah, like you said, it does feel a little like thin. I'm not mad at it. I just hope there's more.
This feels bad and sort of rude to say, but she kind of feels a little bit like some eras of classic Who companions.
I get you.
Which, like in the bad way. I don't mean to sort of rag on classic Who because it's a very different sort of show, but I feel like sometimes you'd get companions who basically function on this level, whereas New Who companions tend to just be a lot more centered, and what they want or need in like their life or their story is a lot more centered and like front and center. Whereas it feels almost here a bit like, it just feels a bit like the introduction you might get for like, I don't know, like a Fifth Doctor companion or something.
I did think of Tegan when you said that. I was like, oh, Tegan.
Yeah.
In some of the behind the scenes stuff, like at the start of the YouTube behind the scenes thing, and then in like the BBC interviews with the actress, there's a lot of talk of like, they end up being best friends. Like the actress said, I would describe their relationship as deeply loving and healthy. I love that they're two very strong and individual people. They really care about each other. They're protective of each other. They care about others. They're both very selfless, and I feel like their value systems align with each other. They're truly equals. I think that's what makes their friendship so beautiful and why they make such a great team. I think it's interesting because I think the bits I like the most of the episode is when they have a tension with them, there's ways in which it's kind of annoying. Like, I like Tegan in some ways, but that's like an annoying character in a lot of ways, which sometimes works really well with the stories and sometimes it doesn't. It's not that like the Doctor is the fun one and I'm always on the Doctor's side, but it's like, well, actually the Davison era maybe least of all, but the Doctor is often the active agent in the narrative making stuff happen. And so when you kind of position characters around them, this is usually the companions' mothers or the companions' families like we're talking about, but sometimes it is the companions themselves who are like, stop doing that. Stop making the story go forward. I dislike this for whatever reason. Sometimes that can feel annoying. And there were moments in this episode where the companion was doing that a little bit to me, but sometimes they were like fake outs. Like when she called the TARDIS ridiculous, I was like, I feel like I've seen more subversion TARDIS reveal scenes where the companion's like, this isn't that good, than I have proper ones over the last few years or whatever. But then she did actually love the TARDIS and I was like, oh, okay. But I just think it's interesting. Lots of this behind the scenes material is saying they're going to be the bestest buddies by the end of the season and super close friends. But the scene I liked the most in this episode was when she's like, do you tell that to all the girls and you just took my DNA without consent? Which, the finale last year had like the Roger Ap Gwilliam DNA harvesting is bad or whatever stuff. I really like that tension kind of in there. I guess my just two thoughts were, one, sometimes tension like that is annoying because it blocks the Doctor doing interesting doctory things. And two, it's interesting how gooey people seem to be saying they end up by the end of the year.
I mean, that might be good. I mean, that might mean there's actually some sort of character arc, at least in a nominal sense. If they actually do start off not the best of buds and they become the best of buds. Compared to, I think, one of our sort of issues with how Ruby played out was that basically they were like best buds almost immediately and they just stayed that way, like in a flat line, and with not many moments of actually like deepening the relationship at all. So, I feel if you start off with them kind of on the back foot with each other, like Belinda and 15, then there are opportunities to have really good moments where they get closer or, that tension goes away. I mean, will that happen? I don't know. But certainly it's a starting position.
Yeah, it feels really bad to like have tempered expectations on the second RTD era so much, but my immediate thought was like, oh no, because like I can see the vision and I can see that it would be really cool if Belinda and the Doctor grow and become closer over the course of the series, but I don't entirely trust that to happen anymore. I really hope it does. I'd like that to happen, but there was things like near the end when there was the best scene in the episode, and then afterwards the Doctor like knew her whole life.
Yeah,
that rang very similar to me as like the the 6-month line from The Devil's Court where it's like, oh, like we're skipping a whole bunch of story, and like it's entirely possible that like we're just gonna skip ahead to not in a like a temporal sense, like not the next episode's not gonna be set 6 months later, but like the Doctor's gonna have like pushed ahead their relationship a little, and I worry that that's a possibility. Because yeah, I agree that like the best parts of their relationship so far have been when Belinda's pushed back against the Doctor, especially the final scene in the TARDIS. I really enjoyed that. It is a hard thing to thread, to not have Belinda be annoying and story stopping, but I do hope that, what I hope is that the being not the best of friends carries on for a little longer than maybe like at least another episode. I like them not being perfectly close yet.
Yeah, I think it's because we're always so attuned to see things from, I guess, the Doctor's point of view when it comes to, what's the mystery of the genetic connection over this? Oh, let's go solve the plot or whatever. So I do find it nicely refreshing to have a companion kind of bring us back down to earth and say, actually, we don't have to solve every mystery. I don't actually care about this. It's more important that you stop, fucking up my life. So yeah, I enjoyed that scene a lot.
I really love that after like however many years it's been of New Who, and I don't care, but like lots of people complain about, why does every companion have to be special? But I didn't mind that, but I did love when like the Doctor was like, this is a series arc, like you're a special companion, and she was like, I don't care, I want to go home. I liked that.
That bit you mentioned a minute ago where the Doctor's like, I've just been up and down your whole life like a bullet, and Belinda Chandra, you are amazing. Oh, yeah, I found that a bit shit.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I don't know what the point of that was. I kind of hate the whole, aren't you amazing? You're so amazing. So we literally know nothing about her. We know less about Belinda than the Doctor does now.
Oh, yeah. At
this point. We just have to go, he's like, you're so amazing, aren't you? Let's have the whole, like, pat on the back. You're amazing. Like, great. How are you supposed to feel about that? Like, it just feel like a very telly, not showy sort of superficial. Actually, I feel like usually RTD would more do this with like the Doctor than the companion, or Chib would do this with the Doctor as well. Everyone just going on about how wonderful and amazing the Doctor is, and it's like, I don't believe you. So maybe it's refreshing to have it turned around for once, but still, I don't really like that kind of writing in the first place.
Oh, no, Chibnall did it to the companions too, you remember? Like 10 points for Yaz. Like,
oh god, yeah.
What do we do without Yaz?
We can't have a universe with no Yaz. We have a timeline with no Yaz.
That's exactly what the Belinda bit was like.
Oh, yeah.
Just trust us. They're a cool character. We promise.
I think you alluded to this a minute ago, Missy, but I don't know how I feel about... to back up, to Doctor Who magazine, Russell said, Belinda was originally called Belinda Finch in earlier drafts, and it took a while before they realised they wanted to reuse an actor they already used in Boom because the actors they were already trying out weren't working. Anyway, Russell says, that character's been simmering for a while. It's a play on Ian and Barbara and Tegan, the companion desperate to get home. This season's strapline is Get Belinda Home. And then elsewhere to the BBC, Russell said, in response to season 1 had the theme of finding Ruby's birth mother. What's season 2's theme? Russell says the theme is Get Belinda Home. Surviving the first episode is a bit of an ordeal for her, but once that happens, it's a very unusual story in that the Doctor can't get her home, and the reason for that is something very important that runs across the series, and then he talks about standalone versus serialized for a while. But that's the big idea of the season is like, let's get her home, and it's hard to get her home, and why is it hard to get her home? He also says, and this is interesting because this wasn't in the episode, it must be in future ones. Belinda has a mum and dad who she loves very much. Her dad is a taxman, her mum's a violinist, and that's a life she wants to get back to. Of course, it has to be said, within this space of one journey to Miami, she's also loving being on board the TARDIS because I think it would be strange for her to not love what the Doctor does and to love his character as well. So she's very quickly enamored by the whole setup. Nonetheless, she's got very strong reasons for getting back. I hope the very quickly enamored thing means we don't get what Missy doesn't want, where like in Lux she switches and she's like, oh, this is perfect, let's be best friends forever. Hopefully it is staggered out like properly and lengthily across the season. But I don't actually know, like, is getting her home a good arc? Is that interesting or not? It feels... My issue with it is just... I think some friends of ours mentioned this the other day. Years ago, it felt like the 50th anniversary set up the 12th Doctor, well, the 11th Doctor, well, the Doctor searching for Gallifrey. He's found out Gallifrey wasn't destroyed. Now he's going to go search for it. And lots of us, I know I very much felt this way. I assume you guys may have as well. Felt like that would be like the arc for Series 8 or longer perhaps moving forward on the show, that the Doctor was going to try and find Gallifrey somewhere. And then that didn't happen. And the Capaldi era very quickly kind of dealt with, we kind of found it, and then it did stuff with that. And in an interview with Crystal D, Moffat was like, well, I thought about it, and I'm paraphrasing him heavily here, but basically, wouldn't that be crap if the Doctor was just going around, oh, Gallifrey's not here, and it's not there, and it's not here either. There's something just very, and remember how Chibnall got rid of Unit to get Unit back? What is the word I'm looking for? Is it linear? It just feels like there's something very, Belinda's not home, let's get her to home. It's just like a very kind of binary thing there, like Gallifrey's found, Gallifrey's not found, Units disband and Units back together. Maybe I'm boiling all storytelling down in a stupid way, but just something about the get her home thing feels...
The trouble is, it's not actually... In like a usual story, like a non-Doctor Who story, where a character's trying to get home and having a very difficult journey to get home, they'll be moving in the direction of home, maybe, and they'll be going through one ordeal after another to try and get there. Think about if you're in the TARDIS, it's just going to be the Doctor going to random places, and it's not actually until one of them is like, oh, I can go home.
It's not really an odyssey, yeah.
If the reason the Doctor can't get her home is that there's some magic time field that means he can't go there, then his adventure's not actually going to be taking him closer to home. He's just going to be going all over the place, and it's not actually an arc. And it really defeats me that RTD and Co have decided that, the strapline for this season is get Belinda home, and the whole arc is about get her home. That's not an arc. That's not anything. That's not even an idea. That's just like something Belinda sort of wants while we're doing like all these other adventures, which are going to presumably going to have their own stories. It's not anything. It's literal nothing. I don't know what the hell they're thinking. Putting this on the posters, get her home. Putting it in the tweets, hashtag get Belinda home. It is the most powerfully unimpressive, uncompelling thing they could possibly have chosen as a hook for this season of television. It really escapes me. I mean, just feels like some sort of barrel scraping, like they had no actual idea. Like they don't know what to talk about. They don't have an actual thing going on here. It doesn't work at all.
Maybe Russell T Davies saw The Martian recently.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not anything. But I wasn't like initially against it because I will talk about the bits I'm against, but like for me, I can see it kind of, depending on how you could play it, I think it does. I don't know what word you were looking for, Neo, but like the word I was thinking of was like, it's just very simplistic. It's just like, she's not home and we get her home. But like, it just is something like ticking away in the background, and I guess this would mean that their relationship would have to become friendlier sooner, where it's like they are just doing regular Doctor Who stuff, but then every so often Belinda's like, oh, are we home yet? And he's like, no. She's like, oh, okay, whatever, that's cool.
I think this was well observed by something Russell said there, but it reminds me of video games where so frequently, especially in more story-based games, especially in ones where if not open world, there's at least some like non-linearity to how the player does something. They can be this tension of, for a game to hook people in, it usually wants a big flashy main quest campaign or whatever thing to start with, which has some very clear, distinct, very marketable hook. You can play the trailer on TV or whatever and people understand the hook. So-and-so took thing from you and you have to get it back, or so-and-so killed your wife, or so-and-so kidnapped your daughter, or whatever other woman you have to retrieve. But there's like a, you know what I mean? There's like a big hook to get you in. And then the player will play a few hours of the opening, and then the world will open up a bit. And then the tension becomes, really the player should go and deal with the big hook thing right away in a storytelling sense. Because if your wife's kidnapped or whatever, why would your character dick around and like learn how to craft or enchant weapons for weeks or something? They would just go and get her back. But that's not really how it works, right? You bought a game, you want to explore the game, you want to explore the game's world. You'll go off and you know the wanky term for this. I don't want to say it because the term annoys me, but you know what I'm talking about. This kind of disparate between
sort of game story disconnect. You could phrase it like that, yeah.
Yes, that's a better way to put it. I feel like that just brought it to mind for me, this idea of, because he's like, Russell's saying, well, it wouldn't be fun if she really, really hated it, would it? Then it would just be kind of like a bad vibe if like she's genuinely getting dragged around, which is sometimes, I guess Ian and Barbara are a good example of that. Felt a bit more normal, but it's not like they really had a it wasn't like, Series 6 with Amy and Rory, this didn't work at all, I don't think, because it was like, well, they have a baby they need to get to in this. We can't just have vibes episodes while they don't have their baby, no matter how timey-wimey you make it. I guess Russ was kind of saying, well, Belinda really wants to get back home, but there's nothing urgent, but she does want to get back home. It's just like this weird way to kind of balance it out is like, we're making the hook get her home and we need to get her home, but also like she'll be fine. Like she doesn't really need to get home right away, but she wants to get, it feels like, I just feel kind of silly even like mining it in this much detail, but it reminds me of games where they just have that weird disconnect between how urgent is something or not.
Just say Witcher 3.
It's like the hook is antithetical to the show. It's like,
yeah,
our goal for Belinda is no more Doctor Who for Belinda. Get her out of the show.
It's worth remembering with Ian and Barbara, I mean, the kind of the hook there wasn't that they wanted to go home, is that the Doctor wouldn't let them go home.
Yeah, that is different.
He fucking kidnapped them. And the first few stories, the tension of the first few stories is that they don't get on with the Doctor at all because he's actively antagonistic to them. And the Daleks happens because the Doctor sabotages his own bloody time machine, It's like, he's unstable, he's actually scary, and they're actually having huge, like, massive falling out, So that's kind of how that show works. And there's nothing remotely like that here with 15 and Belinda. So it's not very good comparison, to be honest.
I have seen a lot of speculation on this, and I don't think I like it, but as in like I don't think this is what I would want to happen, but I've seen people talking about how like the Doctor's just straight up lying about not being able to get home. Like, why would you want that? But what I do think is the potential route that like slightly more likely, which still has the Doctor being a dick, is like Belinda wants to go home, but he's the driving force of like, no, let's just check out this place. Like, I know it's not your home, but like, let's go and see real quick. And she'll be like, yeah, okay. But I think that's like how it's going to go. And then like the bit about him being is like how pushy he is about that, where it's like, come on, like how it's taking her to great places that like not even trying to get her home and just like, well, since we're here, we might as well zoom off to blah, 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 blah. It's just confusing to me how to structure the show in a way that remains interesting and also doesn't make the Doctor look like a dick by intentionally not trying to get her home. But you can't try to get home too quickly because we need to pad this out for the whole season.
I kind of have something else about Belinda, I guess, which kind of ties into the episode, I suppose. So, like, obviously we've talked about what her arc over the course of the series is going to be, but I'm just kind of thinking about her arc in this episode specifically. I guess the whole character journey she goes on. Because you can see where RTD has made a point of stressing that, I guess he wants to show her a moral compass. So, I guess the culmination of the story, whatever, is when she decides to turn herself into the robots and kind of sacrifice herself. And we get that set up in, I think, a very extremely crude way. Like, you have a character called Manny whose only character trait is to blame Belinda for things. So, she's been there 2 hours and he's like, you're as bad as the robots. I can't believe you imply this isn't all your fault. I know nothing about you. I've only known you for 2 hours, but this is all your fault. I'm definitely convinced it's all your fault. And that's so she can feel guilty and be like, oh, it is my fault. And my name is Miss Belinda Chandra. I have to sacrifice myself. And the trouble is, when it actually comes to the climax of the episode, and when she's facing off with the villain, rather than like sacrificing herself or whatever, we get the villain just basically telling her, hold out the diploma and do the time boom thing. And of course that ends up sort of magically fixing everything. So I just feel like, even though this is more of a character arc than Ruby got in her first episode, because at the climax of Ruby Road she ceases to exist, I still feel like in this episode something is just a bit lacking in terms of, like, I mean, again, I guess my constant reference point for this sort of thing is Rose, because, I mean, in her first episode you get the whole gymnastics thing where she kind of, all the kind of worthlessness she's felt throughout her life, kind of, she culminates in the one thing she can do, she does very heroically. Kind of saves the day with that. Whereas kind of, I feel like whenever you get kind of a companion introduction episode and they kind of try to do a character arc thing for the companion, it's like, does it land anywhere near that well? And in this case, it just feels like something's a bit hollow about it. Do you kind of see where I'm going?
Definitely. It feels to me like it's like I think this connects to something you said near the beginning gig, where it's like she feels well, to me at least, feels very like reactive. Whereas like rather than having her be so much of a character on her own, she does have that, but like just from moment to moment we just get bits of her reacting to like the things happening around her, and like rather than being defined by like, well, part of this is part of the plot where she just gets like sucked up, taken up into a spaceship, but like it's not very,
I mean, it's not very dynamic, maybe you could say.
yeah, that's the word, I think. Yeah, I didn't feel like with Rose, there's no moments where I'm like, oh yes, this, I can see like her as a defined character on her own.
In the episode Rose's arc is so... It's like so active. It literally climaxes in like a physical thing. I know like many years ago, I think I probably stupidly, or maybe not, complained about how the climax of The Woman Who Fell to Earth was the Doctor jumping and like, oh, the Doctor's strong and, you know, that's not that interesting. But like in the climax of Rose, we like physicalize, like Rose's growth is from, I'm like in a passive world where it's like, I've consigned myself to a life that isn't that interesting and I'm just kind of floating on. And then the episode kind of builds up, you know, the Doctor, it's like the call to adventure, offers all this and I can go and grab that and I can exert myself onto the world in such a way. And then she does the big swing around the Nestine blob and whatnot. It's like her arc, her like emotional arc and her physical arc are kind of like, there's a confluence, right? And it all just works very well narratively. In this episode, I kind of get sort of the Belinda arc, but it's very like, it's just kind of talky. Like I activated the robot, the little nice robot, so the bad robots are coming, and it just feels more like I kind of get it, but it's very disparate, which isn't great for a first episode. And also, I think I rolled my eyes the most at this out of everything in the episode, because saying someone's name isn't really like I found it was very wispy, the idea of what Alan or Belinda had, well, obviously Alan did some stuff wrong, but some of the stuff they'd like done wrong or whatever just felt like it was saying names. Like, oh, I said Alan's name on the ship. Ooh, I did a bad thing and I need to make up for it. Like, I get that she was like saying go after him, which is bad, but it just feels very like minute. I don't think it's a big deal to say people's names exactly. I feel like her arc could have been redone a little bit to be much more like linear and easier to follow, and like just do you know what I mean? It just felt very wispy.
I think the basic problem is that it's very hard to attribute blame for anything that happens in this episode because so much of it is caused by the time fracture, which is just like a random thing that farts things into random time periods so random loops can happen, just so the plot can happen, right? It's just like an arbitrary plot manufacturing phenomenon that makes time things occur. That for no clear reason, just on a whim, you know, just doing time things. And it's not great. I noticed in this episode, this is kind of back on Belinda more though, the number of times she just says, I'm sorry. I swear I count it's like 7 times. It's like a number of times. It was just really just hitting that drum over and over and over again. It's just very monotonous. But yeah, I do think it's just the broader problem with the story. I think it's just like the lack of, it contributes to the lack of aboutness, is that there's lack of reason for things happening because everything just comes back to convenient time fracture, sort of stripping things. I think RTD is very in love with the idea that you can just go schwupp and just that just justifies kind of anything happening. But I think the point with when Moff wrote like timey-wimey in Blink, that was kind of a justification for a story that had actually been thought through and worked out and had reasons for the events happening in it. Whereas I think if you're then just doing the schwupp, timey-wimey stuff without actually building out an underlying story, you're just kind of almost fetishizing the randomness and meaninglessness of that without actually fulfilling the underlying point and telling the actual story that people liked, you know? Do you see what I mean?
The time fracture reminded me of the tunnels in Flux, where it's like they're just plot relevant portal things. It's just like things that like so much of this episode. This is one of the things that like I really didn't like about it was just how often things were like so blatantly like not even bothered to be like dressed up, so blatantly happening for the plot. And it's like, oh, we have this time fracture that magically put every single piece of this puzzle like where we needed it to be. So many lines of dialogue and character things are like not grounded in any way in the story. The bit where what's his name? Alan was like, "Now, Belinda, come here and hold out the diploma." Like, why would you want her to hold out the diploma? That's not how like marriage works in any way. Like, but it's so they can go schwupp. That's the only reason for it.
Yeah, I think RTD tries to imply, like, briefly there, that actually, Alan is actually in pain and he wants to escape and die and be released or whatever, which I thought was awkward because it undermines the whole thing of him being like the toxic force at the heart of the story. If we're trying to make him actually he's suffering and he's innocently sympathetic and he wants to save the day and blow himself up with the diploma and go schwupp. But it's just not. It's not very a very strong ending. I think it's not a very strong climax for like Belinda or the Doctor, for the heroes of the story, to just do what the villain tells them to do. I don't know, commit suicide, or just like, and that just conveniently happens to blow him up or like reduce him to, just erase him from existence, basically. Which also just instantly solves the entire world and the entire story. Like, it's not a very rousing or compelling, like exciting climax, ending, story, narrative. It really is just, here's a time thing so we can make a time thing happen. And that's why I felt like at the start that this story is so slight. And it's so, like, it's hard to like call this a story about Belinda or about Belinda's, toxic, misogynistic boyfriend or about anything in particular. Because the actual, like, drivers of it are just, could be in any story ever. And they aren't really a story at all.
Yeah, just quickly, another example of things happening for the plot is when Belinda, like, halfway through the episode says, "Wait a minute, when two different things from different points in time exist in the same place, don't they explode?" Like, what? Why would she? Like, to me, that's not an inherently thing that, like, compared to how, like, Bill would be like, "Oh, do you know anything about sci-fi?" She was like, there was like a grounding into which someone would know that and someone might bring up something similar. But for Belinda to just randomly spout out what will inevitably be the plot resolution out of nowhere halfway through the episode, really, I was astounded, because then, like, from that moment on, I was like, oh, so that's exactly what's going to happen, which made it even worse, because both the, like, setup of the resolution and then the act of the resolution itself was triggered by people just randomly stating it. Like, Belinda's like, "Oh, two things at the same time explode," and then Alan was like, "Oh, come on, bring the other piece of paper over here so we can do the thing you mentioned earlier." This whole thing felt so, like, it was just the most, like, bare bones basic, like, putting pieces of a random plot together with, like, no actual story going on, just random plot bits bolted on.
The individual bits, like, for example, I think, like, the starting premise of someone bought a star to name a star after a person, and that person of years later turns out they're the queen of that planet, and the whole civilization has turned up there, and they drop Miss Belinda Chandra bombs. I think that idea is funny. There's kind of a sort of Hitchhikers-ish kind of, like, spin to that idea. I get the appeal of that idea, because it's a funny idea. But the way RTD makes that happen, realizes it, is with the time fracture, sending the diploma back in time, rather than anything that kind of connects to, I guess, the inherent silliness of, like, buying a star and naming a star after yourself. He has to, in order to get the funny image of, like, Miss Belinda Chandraville, he has to basically just use this really quite, I would say, flimsy narrative kind of tissue, which I think is just in order to link, like, a good image, a good idea, like, Miss Belinda Chandra kind, to an actual story. You get just quite, like, underwhelming kind of connective plot stuff, which is just the time fracture, whatever.
Why were the visuals so good in that scene? It felt like such a weird flip into, like, a different episode or something. It was, like, just really arresting and, like, stunning and really cool for a couple of minutes as we had that crazy time Blinovich documents meeting each other thing. That just really took me by surprise. Were you guys similarly like, why does the episode look like this now?
That was the best moment in the episode for me.
Yeah. Definitely. You remember how people used to say when, like, David Tennant could tell when he was in a shit script and he would, like, work his ass off to, like, bring it back and overact and pull every, like, trick he had in the book out. Maybe that's what the director was doing. It's like, oh my gosh, nothing is happening. I need to, pump this up a bit and give it some action.
I remember Empire of Death's climax as well looked quite good visually. It's like this absolute topsy-turvy Doctor Who world now where we're like sighing at the writing or the scripts and going, wow, at like the VFX and the visuals. It's so bizarre.
Missy, I think what you said about Tennant there, I feel like that's basically not just the director, but I feel like the production designers, like everyone for every episode in RTD2 now.
Oh, yeah.
They're just pulling out all the stops on scripts that I would say frequently don't justify just the amount of love. Like even like Alan's costume at the end of this episode when he's in his robot form
Definitely.
looked amazing. Amazing. And I just feel like that's so much love and care and craft poured into such like a thin character. It actually gets a bit upsetting I mean, at this point to witness.
There's been so many moments watching, because they have like 2 behind the scenes shows now, the YouTube one and the Unleashed ones. Watching the Unleashed for this episode, it like makes you agape at like whatever script comes in, all those workers just like go absolutely haywire. Make like how much work goes into like Gig saying, the set for the Owl's crazy like cyber setup, and then just the robots themselves. It's why I remember we used to get annoyed with the 60th and season 1 where sometimes they put like this visual glossy sheen or something in post-production on a lot of the physical things, and it kind of obscures how absolutely incredibly physically built so many of these like monsters and props and whatnot are. We'll talk about this at the end of the discussion, but it's why thinking about the future of the show is frustrating, because it's so well made in so many ways right now, and it's just amazing how much work goes into whether it's RTD's best script he's done in years, or whether it's the worst script he's done in years, or whether it's one like this, which is just kind of everyone else seems to like be constantly like cranking it to 11, which is I guess it's still a great show in a lot of ways.
And I think it's that kind of thing that like, when so much of it is good, like the bad parts stick out even more.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
If everything was shit, we'd be like, okay, fine, it sucks now, bye. But like, so much of this is really good.
And you see so many people, like sci-fi fans or whatever, will like rightfully complain about so much stuff these days just looks like green screen or volumed, or like everything looks too artificial and not real or whatever. Like this show is here, and this is a big genre show, and it's doing amazing physical stuff, and it's doing it so well. It's yeah, you're right. It just makes it even more frustrating when sometimes the scripts or other elements are like not meeting. Like Murray's always, hitting it out of the park, and all these other people are hitting it out of the park. Sometimes the actors, it makes the scripts more frustrating, I suppose.
They literally cast actors to be like old Belinda and old Alan for like 2 frames in this time explosion sequence, and it's so sort of freakish. Like the soundtrack has these like stabs and stutters. Reminded me a bit of the convenience store bit in Twin Peaks Return Part 8.
Yeah.
The chaos of that. Yeah, it feels superficial. It feels like I'm kind of getting enticed by jangling keys here a little bit. But I think being able to just stylistically break like the show or TV that much and sort of assault the viewer with sensations, I think I found that more, just the experience of that, I found more enriching than anything in the actual script, to be honest with you. I feel sometimes, form is, the medium is the message sometimes. I feel like form can be like as much of a sort of a hit to the senses as the actual story or the actual content sometimes. And sometimes when you have the director going this far out to try and like, dress up a script, you can end up outshining it in a lot of ways.
The episode is about something. I thought it was actually, I can't say it's subtle. For an RTD script, it's kind of subtle. Like this could have went much more ham on the incel gender stuff. I actually found it oddly restrained is my barometer completely off there? Like, I was surprised how little it went into the gender stuff, ultimately.
It was like this weird combination of, it's not that it was subtle, because it wasn't, but it was under-implemented for the degree of unsubtlety it had. That's kind of a really bad way of putting it, but it's like, the little bits we had of it weren't subtle, but they were so little that it doesn't feel like it's worked into the episode very much at all. It felt like almost like a footnote within the episode. I feel like it it basically incorporates a swipe at like possessive, misogynistic, toxic boyfriends and men like Alan. But the nature of that and of him doesn't really it certainly doesn't play into how the episode resolves or like climaxes or ends. And the fact it's kind of concealed for most of the episode in a lot of ways. For all the robot stuff, it's not for granted, we're not really thinking about that. And we get it brought back a bit at the end. I liked the reveal, I guess, that the dictator is the companion's kind of shitty boyfriend, and kind of the reveal that he was actually he already seemed sus in the first scene in the flashback, but like we get more of that in the reveal later on. I like that moment, but it doesn't really, like, it doesn't go anywhere after that point. It just sort of spools out as your normal time explosion thing, and the ending, like the way it pans out, doesn't really like enhance the aboutness there at all.
This has reminded me of what I was going to say earlier, which I forgot, but I've remembered now. When Gig, you were talking about like the good visual image and the good idea of like Miss Belinda Chandraville and like Star Certificate. That's a good idea, and I can see a version of this episode working better without her boyfriend in it at all, apart from giving her the certificate at the beginning. And then like there's just a completely unrelated Miss Belinda Chandra world plot happening, and then they resolve that somehow. That like these aspects of this story are so disconnected, and it's kind of like none of them are getting a chance to shine. None of them are connected to any. It's like little bits of everything, because you guys are right that like it was underbaked. It's not there enough. So it could either like, to fix that, we needed either like a lot more focus on the incel stuff, or like just get rid of it and focus on something else. But it's like having little bits of story that don't really connect and not delving deeply into any of them, I think contributes to like why this story doesn't really land as a story.
With the 50s aesthetic of the robots and Belinda Chandra planet and everything like that, I was surprised in the Unleashed, Russell talks a bit about why he did that, and like saying, like tonally and visually, if they'd done modern AI robots, it would have looked like a certain way, but if you do it this way, the comedy works more and all this sort of stuff. I thought, I guess I can still think there's kind of a link, isn't there, between like incel-ish possessiveness, girls can't do maths, with like 50s sci-fi, the women are there to scream, 50s gender roles in America and the UK and whatever in general. Like, I feel like there was kind of a potential coherence there, but it doesn't really go anywhere or do anything with that. Well, we have that weird scene where Johnny Green, who I really like, he was, of course, he was in It's a Sin. This episode was directed by Peter Hoy, did It's a Sin. He was in It's a Sin in those great awkward moments with Richie and the handjob offer. I'm pretty sure was his stuff, wasn't it? Yeah. And
everyone wants to come.
Yeah. And he was like a lead, or the lead almost, in the quote unquote season 5, season 6, season 7 Torchwood audio odd continuation things, where I always thought he was pretty good in those. Hostile Environment was really, that was such a good episode, audio, whatever you want to call it. I've always liked that actor, so it was fun seeing him in this, especially playing so against type. Like, he's playing, in those Tortured ones, he's playing such a, stereotypical, very young, hot, gay guy that Captain Jack, goes and sleeps with and all these things. It was funny to see him here playing a very, like, gamery, like, kind of gross guy, very different mode. But anyway, when the robots come and when the robots arrive in his room and take him to the planet and whatnot, and he's like, "Oh, you're saying there's aliens and lasers and I get to win the rules of the game? Oh, hell yeah." That, I think, was the closest to like trying to mesh up some of the aesthetic of the robots with his gender stuff with the episode in general. But that felt very broadly drawn to me. Like, that didn't really feel like incisive incel gamer commentary to me. And the episode didn't really do that much with it anyway. But yeah.
It's like when Belinda has that line, "You've taken coercive control and made it complete control of the whole planet." I mean, that sort of represents, I guess, the level that RCG is sort of writing these concepts at. It's like, it's here in name. Certainly he's put the phrase coercive control in the script. That's straight out of the, all the theory and kind of the analysis. But it's not But then you have, the whole, it's like when Alan just kind of regresses to like TV writer's concept of like teenager playing like Call of Duty. Oh, it's like video game. I can beat boop, shoot enemy, get loot. It's like, it is genuinely, it's both crude and not sort of worked in a way with like insight or nuance or like wit at all. It really is just the most kind of superficial handling of these ideas. And you could weave them all together so much more interestingly, like with the whole 50s aesthetic, the whole return to tradwife values or whatever, like association you might have there, or the whole like gamer world sort of thing, and the whole like very kind of intensely kind of insular or like misogynistic sort of nerd culture. There are just a lot of things there, and I think if you approach them with just kind of a hammer rather than a scalpel, you just won't end up with very insightful writing.
This may be a hot take, and I don't think it's on the same level of quality as this, but I've been thinking about another episode recently, and the reveal of, Alan and incel. He's behind it all. That, like, he had these tendencies, he was an incel all along, reminded me of the end of Dot and Bubble, where it was just like, oh, the reveal was that, like, this has been something much darker and, like, a serious, like, societal issue that we're tackling, it's a reveal at the end. I'm not really a big fan of Dot and Bubble, but I think it's a lot better. Obviously, it's a lot better than Robot Revolution, but I just remember feeling that, like, oh, this is it's an interesting choice to again structure an episode where you're talking about a serious issue, and to have it happen so late in the story, to have it be like a big reveal at the end. And yeah, especially not as much in Dawn of the Bubble, but definitely in Robot Revolution, it doesn't leave much room for actually engaging with it. We get that flashback where it's like, oh, he was actually way worse than the opening told us, and then that's really it, because then he like dies very shortly afterwards. It's very surface level.
Yeah, I get like the idea of revealing this is what the story was really about, kind of in a late phase, but what that has to do is kind of make everything that's come before click into place and take on like a new meaning.
Exactly.
It can't just be like its own sort of sealed off little bubble for like, 60 seconds, right at the end, because then it's not really adding anything. And I think and to get that proper effect, for it to fully work, the themes have to be sort of worked all the way through, just in a way that, for the reveal to work, it just has to be worked through in a way that is, I don't know if subtle is the word, but like just cleverer, just a bit cleverer than this, that hides it from us in a way that it's kind of still there.
Yeah, and like having to have a flashback was not the way to do it. It's just completely separate.
I think we've kind of talked at this topic a little bit in all the little discussions we've had so far, but wasn't the plot of this episode kind of inscrutable? Like, it's actually really, really, if you try and like map this out, it's bizarrely convoluted. The different time levels of, I was just thinking of how Alan, because we're talking about Alan's gender stuff, how he got the robots to him in the first place. It's like this very convoluted chain of how the robots got the diploma in the first place through the fracture long ago or whatever, and then how there's the Belinda bit, and then also the robots going back. Then there's like the 10-year disparity with the technology of how he remakes, and then I guess it's is it meant to be a bootstrap loop that like the robots look that way because Alan came with them earlier, and then he made them look like it's. I
guess so.
It's very like, is there a point to how weirdly it actually? You know what it legitimately reminds me of is some of the old Chibnall era scripts where it's like, this isn't really that dense or interesting as an episode, but it's like bizarrely complicated for no good reason. I don't think you need to really understand all the mechanics of the plot in this episode, because it's not really about that. It's about introducing Belinda, then doing a bit of the robot stuff. But am I just getting stupider, or is it like a weirdly complicated plot?
The robot revolution is simple and indescribable.
You can see how it was like worked out backwards from what RTD needed it to do. So the result is like, so you're right, it is convoluted. You have, not only do you have the robots going back like 10 years in time to Alan, and the Doctor getting set 6 months or whatever, or Belinda get them getting separated by 6 months. You also have the diploma. When it gets brought to the planet, it gets sent back 5,000 years. So you've got like multiple different like time gradations of things getting flung around, all just so that each like part of this story, so the Belinda world, the robots taking over, Alan being there, and sort of Belinda being here and the Doctor being there, it can all work at the points they needed to work. But it is all hand-waved in the same way, which is the time fracture went schwupp. And the result is that, like, Belinda randomly saying something while she's getting kidnapped causes everything that causes her being kidnapped and causes everything else that happens in the story. So it's just like doing lots and lots and lots of bootstrap loops just so nothing can have an actual reason for happening, really, except maybe Alan's incelness kind of causing stuff to go bad.
It is slightly similar to Flux, and then like if you're like your eyes are glazed over and you're just like half watching it, you're like, yeah, okay, I guess, like, oh, okay, that went back in time, and oh my god, he went back in time too. Whoa, it's a time travel show. But like if you like sit down and like actually think about it, then it starts to get like messy, and then it's not intended. Well, that's not true of Flux, but like this feels like the one that was like, this episode feels like it's not intended to be looked at too deeply.
I've purged the plot of Spyfall from my mind, but I feel like there was probably something stupid like that in there as well. Just like abuse of time travel or whatever.
With the lady figurine, yeah, it was very complicated.
Yeah, oh god, yeah. Oh god, why'd you have to remind me of that? I literally said I purged it.
Well, if we're going to circle back around to some good stuff in the episode, Missy and I have said we like this scene. I don't know if you have, Gig. I assume you did. The scene where she's like, hey, back off, dude, at the end, where he's like scanning her and she's like saying, I hate one of your... She's doing... It's kind of a Clara Series 7 thing, isn't it? Of, hey, I'm not one of your adventures. I'm my own human being, and stop treating me just like another damsel or sassy companion or whatever. Did you like that scene, Gig, before I talk about it more?
I do like it. I would say, if I have like a slight criticism, it does feel a little bit like one of those moments where the companion gets the thesis statement, or like the point that like the writer wants to make.
Yes.
And just gets put like verbatim in the companion's mouth. Like, you scanned my DNA without my consent, Doctor. It's like, oh, right, okay. Yeah, sometimes it can feel a little bit didactic sometimes. Like, here's the point of the scene, and not so much like organic. But like, that's kind of a minor, sort of mild criticism. Like, I appreciated the point of it. I liked kind of turning the Doctor's whole excitement on its head. I liked kind of rebuking the entire series arc excitement nonsense. And obviously I like anything that kind of gives the Doctor something to actually sort of perform, or like some sort of emotional beat to go through. Some inner conflict at all. Anything like that is welcome. More than welcome.
There's two things I want to say about it. And the second thing is about what Ncuti does with the scene, yeah. The first is just, so if it's setting up their dynamic, in the BBC interviews to set up the season, Ncuti himself said, when he's asked about what's the dynamic going to be and how it will be different from Ruby's, Ncuti says, I think the viewers can expect to see the Doctor challenged by Belinda in a way that he hasn't been before. He's very used to sort of charming his way out of anything and getting what he wants, but Belinda doesn't want to be in a spaceship with him. She wants to go home and be on Earth and get to her shift, and has no interest in exploring the universe with a madman that breaks all his promises. So I guess it's different from Ruby because Belinda has accumulated more responsibilities throughout her life. She's at the stage in her life where she has responsibilities and isn't interested in flying around the universe. It's an interesting dynamic. It starts quite push and pull. I think with Ruby and the Doctor, it was like two magnets attracted to each other. And this one is like they're trying to figure each other out. The amount the Doctor learns from Belinda about himself and the less desirable qualities about himself actually helps him to grow. Each companion helps the Doctor to grow, but this one is in a very different way because he's learning about the sides of him that aren't great. I want to get onto the sides from that aren't great thing in a second because I think he does something interesting in his performance in that scene. But one thing I do like going on here, and this kind of actually does tie into the gendery stuff in the episode in a way, I guess, is it's very like, I mean, the episode's, how old is Belinda meant to be at the start? Like 16, 17?
That's what I assumed, yeah.
Obviously a woman, a girl at that age, and then a woman at, I assume Belinda's meant to be like 32. There's a whole different gamut there in many ways because of, 32-year-old Belinda has been with people like Alan and has learnt from that, certain warning signs and certain ways men can act or people can act in general. And, I like how Shooty says accumulating. I think that's a great word for what we're kind of talking about here. Belinda has accumulated experiences through her life. So by the time she's 32, she can kind of clock someone, whether it's the doctor or someone else, in a way a 16-year-old Belinda couldn't, because she's seen like the threads of narratives before, that someone can start presenting this way, but this is just like part one of their story, which goes on to this and that. This is like the hook. It's like the video game thing we were talking about. A guy can hook you with this, but the actual narrative he's going to ensnare you into is this or whatever. I think all that stuff's really interesting because it gets into what Russell has written a lot on different shows, which is this kind of age dynamic. I mean, Queer as Folk has, the underage relationship stuff. I think it's an interesting thing to push with the Doctor because you can't push this too hard because it undoes the show a bit, in that the Doctor is thousands of years old or whatever, and he mostly hangs around fairly young British women. It like that is irrevocably creepy, but that's why the show, like, sometimes it'll lean into it a bit for drama, but you can't fully unpack that without undoing the show, because that, like, mechanically the show is going to keep having the Doctor around with young people, and for multiple reasons they're often going to be women. There's reasons it's going to keep going this way. So the show engages with a bit sometimes, like it did with Rose a bit, but I feel like it's one of those things the show just kind of awkwardly has to dance around a little bit to keep going the way it normally does. I don't want to list a million qualifications. Anyway, the point is, I just think it's an interesting contrast to have, like, I'm not calling him creepy necessarily with Ruby, but Ruby was very young and very enamored with him. And that's a very easy relationship, I think, for a guy like this 15th Doctor who's very young. And he obviously is a queer Doctor, but he's very attractive in so many ways. I like this kind of gender dynamic of he's been with one woman who was very young and bought into him very easily. And now he's with a second woman who's had her own life more and has kind of presumably experienced different sorts of men. I just think it's an interesting gender thing. And I like how Russell and Shooty are in interviews kind of talking about it in this gender age way in terms of like the actual age of Ruby versus Belinda. I just think that's actually quite interesting. I have no idea how that's going to evolve over the series, especially because they're all kind of saying they end up being best buddies very soon anyway. But I think, wouldn't that be crazy to have like a series where the companion does just kind of continually roll their eyes? I mean, Donna did this a bit with 10th Doctor, but I think there's kind of the flirtatious way. Did you say this to all the girls? I think that's kind of a different thing she's identifying in 15. I just found that really interesting to kind of go like, your faux seduction stuff doesn't roll on me. I've known guys like you or whatever. I just think that was quite interesting, that dynamic. In contrast with, it's interesting specifically in context with Ruby having been so young, I guess.
I will say, talking about it like this, it does start to remind me a lot of actually 11 and Clara. And kind of, it feels almost like the slight rebuke of the Doctor's kind of seductive ways and sort of casually, almost like unthinkingly controlling, kind of overbearing kind of treatment of young women. It feels like we've been here, like slightly familiar territory.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, again, it's not a complaint. I love having like an older companion who can actually feel kind of more mature. And can feel anything that makes a companion and the Doctor feel like they are just equal leads of the TV show is really welcome to me. So I don't have complaints there.
No, yeah, I thought it was really interesting too. I really enjoyed that scene, but I didn't think about how it connects back to the beginning and all the life lessons that Belinda must have learned over the last 17 years, which like enriches it. And I also think this is going to be, I don't know how they're doing it, but I am excited for this season. It made me think of 11 and Amy rather than 11 and Clara, by the way. So lots of stuff to take.
The other thing with this scene with Shooty, I really want to ask you guys, because I rewatched this bit a few times and I'm really curious what you think he's doing with his acting here. I mean this like in a good way. When she says you're dangerous, he says, I'm sorry. He smiles, and then he looks more serious and he says, inexcusable. And then she makes a face at him and he says, with both hearts, I apologize. Well, I don't want to say how I'm reading it. How do you guys read his sincerity there?
I think with his like kind of smiling and sort of chuckling at things, I feel like it strikes me as kind of a nervous smile a little bit. I feel like it's kind of like a thing where he's like constantly like bewildered at being confronted and kind of like not sure how to like arrange himself or like react. He's kind of like compulsively falling back on like the grinning and like the and then having to sort of correct himself and kind of switch back into serious mode. I don't. It doesn't strike me as like a nasty grin or smiling that he does. It just feels like almost like a compulsive thing. Like I think just constant nervous energy that I think Ncuti sort of has in quite a lot of the show. I think that's kind of where that comes from. He seems to default to like that kind of that grin, even when his eyes may be a bit desperate. It's like he's sort of projecting this constant sort of like welcoming, kind of reassuring face, even without necessarily knowing he's even doing it.
Yeah, I kind of felt the same way, which is I figured he wasn't expecting this level of pushback, and he's trying to keep composure while scrambling to find out. Like, not in like a really like negative way, just like, yeah, it's like he's awkward and he's trying to figure out what to do. I particularly noticed it in a few lines earlier. I think when he's like, just before she mentions the DNA stuff, he's like talking about how great this is, series arc, this is so exciting, I want to solve this mystery with you. And he leans in and he does his laugh and his big smile, and she's not smiling. And for a second, he continues to laugh. Like, he's like insisting upon the laugh, and then like realizes that the laugh that it usually works for him is not working in this instance. So he stops laughing. And I was like, oh, this is like, yeah, it's a really interesting mode for this Doctor to be in. We've never seen him be like it before. And I do think he's listening, and like, just like, you can see the gears working in his head. And he's like, oh, this casual, easygoing charm that I have isn't 100% going to work on everyone. And not in a malicious way, like he's figuring out how he has to like sneakily trick Belinda into liking him, but just in a like earnest, casual way, like, oh, how just how do I function in this situation? And I feel like it was really earnest. Where he was like, oh, I didn't even realize I was doing that. I didn't know that I was like being that kind of way, and like how it was affecting you. And I'm sorry for that.
I feel like he was being insincere, but not in like I don't think he was mocking her, but I think it's the writing too, inexcusable. It's just I think it's a pompous sort of reaction. I like the ambiguity there, basically. I think it's interesting that I can't really map how, like, it doesn't, if it is sincere, then he's being quite manic in the way like you guys are describing, which is interesting in itself. It's just an interesting exchange, basically, however you slice it. So I quite like that.
Inexcusable. It does feel like kind of almost overcompensating kind of way. Of, believe me, I'm very, very serious. Like, you're kind of gilding the lily a little bit rather than like a sincere, actual full-on sincere apology.
If he like hand-waved it with, oh, this is normal, in the future or whatever, I would kind of buy it more, that he was like, oh, I didn't really think about what I was doing. But like the grave inexcusable, it just feels a little like he's over-egging it, which is interesting.
Like, if someone switches 100% like on a dime that fast, it's like, do they actually believe what they're saying?
Yeah.
One kind of note, they don't really raise this, but like, even just the fact that he tells Belinda, oh, dude, I talked to your descendant, like 3,000 years in the future, your descendant, you're going to have kids. Even just that is kind of locking someone into this weird life path. Like, what if they didn't want to have kids? What if they didn't want to have descendants? Or if they weren't planning on that at all? Especially to say that to a woman as well. It just feels like sort of locking them into this like reproductive future. It's just like a weird thing to do, I think, to someone. Like, there is something creepy about that. And it does feel tangentially kind of connected to the whole possessive Al kind of little miss kind of controlling, breed for the future of the species, or whatever kind of like thing there. So it's kind of like a fun tangential sort of link. Even just what the Doctor's doing with this whole sci-fi conceit is nonetheless kind of this putting this possessive thing onto Belinda.
Yeah, that's well said. That's part of why I really loved in Series 8 how the awesome pink stuff all evolved, because it felt like kind of a refutation of the like ancestry, descendants, very linear, deterministic stuff you get in some seasons or episodes like this. It was fun to kind of subvert that and have all that isn't what ends up happening, or that's not the connection you think it is. But I guess Mundy is her descendant, so I suppose Belinda does presumably have kids of some point.
Or it could be an awesome situation where, time goes wibbly.
Yeah.
So there's wiggle room, because Clara never actually had kids, well, as far as we know. yeah, okay, I don't know why I said that. She didn't have kids. So Orson, I mean, maybe Orson doesn't exist, or maybe there's some like weird sort of time thing whereby he can still exist somehow. But I don't know.
Yeah, I think I think there is lots of wiggle room for Monday, and just like, I don't think there will be, but like, there is potential.
I have something that kind of runs through this episode that I want to talk about. Sasha 55. So at the start, kind of with Sasha 55, like kind of the first big thing in this episode is that when they're fighting the robots, she gets her kind of obvious kind of death flag line, like, take me to see the stars, Doctor. And then, 13 seconds later, she dies. So that's the first time we kind of notice her as a character, is when she says that thing where she's like, oh, obvious companion candidate, which means she's going to tragically die. And then immediately she dies. And I've seen it said somewhere that RTD must have intended that as black comedy. And I'm sure he laughed when he wrote that. But I don't feel it is actually played as comedy, to be honest with you, because immediately after, not only do we get the Doctor doing slow motion, like, no, Sasha, but then immediately after we see kind of serious, moody scene where he's shedding a tear for Sasha. And then throughout the episode, it's like, we're playing this for pathos, like, oh, we're mourning those we've lost. It's Sasha. Like, Sasha, did you say that to Sasha as well? Sasha died. Like, they're taking it very seriously. And I just feel like throughout the whole episode, that's something I felt was almost poisoning it. Because when the idea of like death and pathos and suffering and loss is treated so glibly at the start, especially when you've got a scene where so many people are getting shot dead and getting vaporized, and just like this one character who's had one line to suggest that she likes the Doctor, and suddenly she's like the one who we're going to like performatively mourn and take very seriously and be very sad about it. First of all, it's very hard to actually feel sad in those moments. And then whenever it comes up again, we're just being repeatedly reminded of how like superficially and like weakly and cheaply that was done. It feels like the mechanization of pathos, or almost like the idea, I guess like the cliches, or like the usual structures around making you sad for a character in a Doctor Who episode are almost being parodied or being sent up for how like overfamiliar they've become. But we're not actually laughing. It's almost like it's like we're being laughed at, like as an audience for watching this stuff. The writer's just like, oh yeah, I can just flick this switch and do the things that you're so used to in every bloody Doctor Who episode, and isn't that sad? It just feels so heartless and just like robotic about it, ironically enough. And so whenever it gets brought up again, that's just like the whole, we're going to name the Citadel in honour of those we've lost. And of course, how many people have died, right? But we're going to name it after Sasha 55, the only person who matters. There's just something that just feels really powerfully unpleasant about that. Like, just writing an episode has in itself become a joke that RTD's in on, and that we're all at the receiving end of, like a joke at our expense. I just really didn't like any of that. Like, did any of you kind of like feel even remotely? What do you guys think about that?
To me, it was frustrating because how to phrase this? It's like I could see why. Well, I assume main reason Russell T Davies was doing it was like to set up the end conversation we just talked about, which is like, oh my god, you're dangerous. Like, yeah, like companion like traveling with the Doctor is dangerous, but like it was done in such like a mechanical way that like I didn't feel like unpleasant about it, but I was just like, I felt nothing about it. And I guess that's not a good thing to feel about like the death of a character, like which is meant to be an emotional thing, because like you say, it's not played for black comedy. I think I've seen some people talking about that too, and I think I'm trying really hard not to say a cope, but it's like a way of understanding it in a way that makes more sense than maybe how it was presented, because like it's done so mechanically and so like offhandedly that I think it's reasonable for people to read it as black comedy, even though I don't think it was intended that way. It's just so little like effort is put into it that it comes off unintentionally comedic. So yeah, I was just like underwhelmed. I was just like rolled my eyes, and like the end naming thing in particular. It's like, yeah, okay, I get it.
I think it's like one reason it's kind of hard to read it as believable. It's hard to feel that much. It's hard to feel it that much. It's like when you have that fight scene when so many people are getting vaporized, it's like the Doctor having like one specific person be the reason the Doctor cries and sheds a tear. It's like, what? it just, something doesn't quite scan. Like, if he's in a situation where he knows it's high risk and anyone could die, anyone could get shot by the robots at any moment, to just have, like, this one person, which apparently, like, to show that he's so sensitive and so, like, reactive to all this death and suffering, by having him fixate on one person just because she was, I don't know, nice to him or something. It just doesn't feel believable to me. It feels like cardboard writing. Well, that's kind of the phrase that comes to me. And that kind of applies to characters like Manny as well, who, like I said before, he has no character traits other than just, like, randomly getting on Belinda's case, even though he has only known her for, like, less than an hour. And just, like, blaming her for things that even though she literally hasn't done anything, he's just really, like, on her case. Just all of those side characters just felt like complete just crap to me. And I feel like the excuse for all of it will be, well, it's for kids, we're writing for kids. It can be, it's just froth, it's just popcorn froth or whatever. But at this point, it feels like talking down to the audience, or like talking down to kids. I feel like if a kid watched this, I feel like it just feels like an excuse to, like, not bother with stuff, or not write in any of the fun, or, like, warmth, or wit, or, like, nuance, or, like, humanity. Kind of make stories like this fun and entertaining, just because you feel there's no reason to bother anymore, or there's some excuse not to bother. And I really don't like, I feel like talking down to kids is, like, the complete inverse of what people like about Doctor Who in the first place. Like a family show that kind of actually can have, like, a bit of intelligence and, like, depth to it at times.
I've seen a few people saying that, like, the stuff with Sasha 55 is that kind of thing where we're used to the shape of the Doctor Who story, and then, like, it's sped along for the sake of Belinda's story, so that we just, like, hit the highlights, and, like, not intended in a lazy way, but just to, like, quickly go through it, so we can hit that, oh, you're a dangerous person, and oh, traveling with the Doctor is dangerous. But I mean, I don't buy any of that. The side characters just feel like plot devices. Like, they're there for the sake of the plot rather than, like, which, I mean, like, all side characters are, but they're not meant to feel like that. They're supposed to feel like characters. But no, Sasha 55 is just there to die, and Manny's just there to scowl at Belinda, and they're just, like, cardboard cutouts of characters. Like, I remember I saw someone say that, like, someone made a joke about how, like, when they close the door at the end of the episode, the windows on the TARDIS, like, they go dark, and someone was like, oh, does that mean that, like, Miss Belinda Chandraworld stopped existing? Like, they thought it was, like, a proper plot thing, but I'm like, it isn't. But I was like,
it might as well have.
That universe stops existing the second we leave, because they don't exist outside of their relationship to us. They're nothing.
You talked about, like, our familiarity with this stuff, and kind of we know kind of the beats of the kind of Doctor Who story, but it's like, why is this supposed Disney revival of the show kind of like for a new audience, whatever? Yeah, worldwide, let's get more people watching the show, let's introduce a whole new generation to the show. Why is it doing this thing where it just relies on our, like, boring, like, dreary over familiarity with these beats and tropes just to kind of get this stuff out of the way? It's like, why isn't it trying to make it feel new again? Why isn't it, it's just not an excuse. What's the point in even doing this stuff if you're just hinging it all on the fact we recognize it instantly because we've seen so many episodes? Like, it does feel like it feels tired is the word. Okay, one little thing I liked in Robot Revolution. I liked the scene with the X-ray blanket. I just get a kick out of the Doctor kind of being excited to teach someone about an organ called the pasculum and pointing to it on, like, a diagram of someone's body, internal organs, and the companion being curious about, like, alien biology and stuff, and just them having a moment, just kind of marvel, like some piece of technology or some, like, strange detail of the world building there. I just like that. It just kind of takes me back to the whole, just that curiosity that I think it kind of animates maybe like early Doctor Who, when just like, what strange kind of worlds and sites can we visit, and the characters can just be curious and just dwell on it for a bit. I just liked that moment, and I even liked the Doctor kind of holding up to himself and showing up, hey, I have 2 hearts, check me out. And Belinda, like, listening to him, like, whoa, this is really freaky. I can hear, like, your double heartbeats going on there. I just like anything that suggests an actual sincere, like, wonder in kind of the universe, or the strange things they can experience out there, I think is nice. And I remember in season 1 last year, one thing we were kind of complaining about was, like, a lack of wonder in the world. And I think moments like that, where the Doctor and companion can just kind of enjoy learning about something, kind of bring a bit of that back. I like that moment.
I loved that moment too.
This is Gallifrey played in there as well when he was talking about
Those two hearts.
presumably, yeah, the two, and then him giving himself the thing to do with the episode or whatever. Yeah, so that was nice.
It was that it's exactly what you were saying, Giga. It's like, why are we not trying to find fresh ways of doing the same tired old things? And that was a fresh way of like explaining to audiences, oh, he's got two hearts. Like, it's a nice scene, and it, like, in addition to all the other good stuff going on, like great relationship stuff, I can see how Belinda and the Doctor will become friends through that scene. Like she's intelligent and he's intelligent, and they're both curious, and I can see that there's a lot of common ground there. But yeah, that was like a great scene that like covered a lot of ground.
Also, one more thing I like. I do think when she said dropping Miss Belinda Chandra bombs,
Yeah.
I thought that was a good. I thought it was, a very superficial, just funny, sleed bit of like dark humour there. I think that kind of tied together like the basic joke of the whole Belinda Chandra world there. I thought that was the most successful instance of that.
Why was the Sutekh growl noise sound effect thing played when the TARDIS was screwing up at the end? That noise, I thought we were trained to associate that with the Sutekh setup stuff. You know, like the growling thing. It was in the 60th too.
I feel like at this point it's just going to be the noise that indicates freaky pantheon, like evil demon things going on. Like whatever the big evil villain is, it's gonna make that noise at this point in the TARDIS. So shit hit the fan.
Can I say I didn't recognize it as the growl, the same growl. Was it the same growl?
Yeah, we hear that in Yonder and a few other episodes. I'm pretty sure it was like the musical setup for, oral setup for that stuff. But yeah, I thought that was over. We said a lot of stuff about the show feeling tired towards the end there. I want to shift into that a bit if you guys are chill with that.
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
Okay, so we've discussed the episode itself, the robot revolution, but I think what's really happening now in terms of the show and the fandom as of April 2025 is it's like there's a spectre haunting Doctor Who, isn't there? It's not just being whispered about by fans, as fans always have whispered about it, and it's not just being, said in YouTube comments and Discords and things. It's getting reported quite widely and consistently in the tabloids now. The spectre of cancellation. The Sun has been running with it quite a lot. There's been, the classic BBC slaps where they slap back and they say, well, technically there's not chaos in Cardiff because XYZ. Shit feels weird compared to last year or the year before. There's a very different vibe to when RTD2 started, right? Even though really only around half of the Disney Plus order of episodes have come out at this point, more or less, there's a very funereal or kind of mournful vibe. Am I projecting or something? Or do you guys feel the same kind of thing in the fandom, if not in yourselves?
I know what you're talking about. I think it's because at the start of RTD2, everyone was kind of convinced this is going to be the biggest thing in the world. Gigantic juggernaut, most important, essential thing in pop culture, huge revitalization, biggest fandom on Earth, biggest show on Earth, everyone really successful, really super happy. Disney renews like fucking 10 more seasons immediately. This is the future. And then that didn't materialize. Like, it just didn't. I mean, the show existed, whatever your opinion of it. I think it just didn't. I mean, I'm sure, people watch it on Disney Plus or whatever, but it doesn't feel like it's taken over and become really important or essential to people's lives, or it doesn't seem like people care. And, then season 2 comes out, and however season 2 plays out, I mean, it might be better than expected, but it doesn't feel like there's any kind of, big narrative to kind of hook people in again, nothing making it, exciting, big, popular, biggest thing on TV or whatever, no. Hashtag GetBelindaHome, who cares? It feels like it's only the fans are still watching, obviously. but it doesn't feel like the smash hit that would have been required to kind of make this an ongoing concern has materialized. And now, because we've got this Disney deal that only existed for 2 seasons, as we approach the end of that period, there's just a gigantic question mark. Like, well, you've bet the entire farm on this whole move to Bad Wolf from the streamer, and there's just no clear prospect of like what happens if that just doesn't go anywhere.
In February, so 2 months ago from us talking now and the season 2 starting, there were Radio Times, which is, such a mouthpiece for the show a lot of the times, had an article I thought was funny. So the headline is, Doctor Who has not been shelved, BBC responds to rumours. And then it's kind of a response to one of multiple Sun articles, and it's going in saying that the Sun's anonymous source claimed that star Ncuti Gatwa was eyeing a move to Los Angeles to pursue Hollywood work, and that he had filmed a regeneration sequence for the end of the current run. However, a spokesperson for Doctor Who commented, "This story is incorrect. Doctor Who has not been shelved. As we have previously stated, the decision on Season 3 will be made after Season 2 airs. The deal with Disney Plus was for 26 episodes, and exactly half of those still have to transmit. And as for the rest, we never comment on the Doctor and future storylines." Right now, I don't want to discuss any of the veracity or not of any of that. It's just, this isn't like, when the BBC is kind of responding, no, the show's not canned, it's not the vibe. This doesn't feel celebratory. Like, I know the BBC's responded, and sometimes even the fact the BBC has to respond can kind of be funny or edgy. Like, remember when Dark Water aired, and I believe there were lots of complaints about the darkness of the sadistic stuff Moffat was writing in there. After Timeless Children, the BBC did some response about origin stories, normal in science fiction. It just feels like very on the back foot for lots of people to be saying this at all. It's like there's blood in the water, basically. When the tabloids start really going after it for this, and there can be so many reasons why this is happening. One, maybe there's something to it. Two, obviously there's the whole like socio-political angle of these sorts of tabloids. The show's never been easier to go after, I think. Even in the Jodie Whittaker years. Well, actually, I don't know. The show is much more openly queer now, and Russell's, I think, a more forceful showrunner in the press. I don't really know if...
And Ncuti's black.
Yeah. Also, this might be like... I don't know. I've turned a corner on Chibnall lately since following his Blue Sky, so I'm not trying to kick a dog. Yeah, but was the show less culturally relevant in the Jodie years, necessitating like the tabloid, like why the tabloids bother going after it? Versus now, not only is the show got a big black queer doctor and Russell often in the press, it's also is it more in the cultural like sphere? I don't know. I suppose if only there were some numbers we could use to measure that. Does that make any sense? That kind of, are they going after it more now because it's more around?
Well, I think it's the whole situation with it. I think during Chib Who, even though, I think just because the Chib Who era was just kind of BBC Studios just making the show as they'd been making it for years and years, there was no real prospect of it like actually getting anything actually seriously happening to it, because it was just rolling along. I feel like at that point in Chib Who, it was just like, well, we're just locked onto this like endless, just grind of whatever comes out at this point. Whereas if you have a big, huge, dramatic shift to like Disney, new management, everything's different, and now now there is actually a question mark. I think that now the fate of the show, because it is actually more visibly up in the air, whereas before it wasn't. Now there is there is a hook for all these like media narratives about its impending doom and fate and whatnot.
Well, Russell is such a good writer. It sounds like sarcastic. I'm not being sarcastic. He's a good writer. In one of the Doctor Who magazines from earlier this year, in his letter from the showrunner, he wrote in a way where I think he was trying to do like kind of a rousing thing about the show's going to live on and the show's going to be fine. But I got kind of like the opposite vibe from it. I'll just read out a little bit of it. It's him saying, "It's quiet. The studios are quiet. Old metal beams tick and creak. A distant door slams as someone passes through. Outside an engine, then gone. The studios of the Bad Wolf in old Cardiff town sit and wait. They are calm, they are patient. They were once a factory that made TV. So it's always felt like the right home for the show, and they occupy a massive footprint." He talks about the size for a while. And then he goes on to say, and now the universe sits in darkness. And then he talks about the sets for the incoming spin-off and the sets to do with the robo chamber for Belinda and stuff like that. And then he starts talking about it's been quite a run, hurtling through what's called the First Order. That's not a Star Wars reference, though I love its grandiosity. It simply means the first order of 3 specials, 2 seasons of Doctor Who, and a 5-episode spin-off, 26 episodes in total. Shooting them felt like forever. It felt like 10 seconds. And now the TARDIS sits in shadow, like a secret. And then he talks a bit more about, how he's feeling and what's going on with the set and marketing and all those things to come. And he goes on towards at the end, he says, while the episodes grow and gather and coalesce, the studios creak, dust in the air, an old coffee cup on its side where a Titan will soon stand on your TV. Plans sit waiting. The suspense is actually Doctor Who being alive in 2025. And the important thing is, here comes season 2. And then he starts glazing up Mrs. Flood and stuff like that. I don't know if it's just me projecting, but just the ruminating on the sets are empty and there's no one around in the studio and stuff. And getting so very, very literal with we were asked for this many episodes and we got funded for this many episodes and we've produced this many episodes. And I don't like this air of desperation. It gives me very similar vibes that I got towards the end of the Chibnall era where things were getting increasingly unsure in terms of what was going to come next.
Well, similar to the news articles, the fact that this is being written is not a good sign because the production notes could be about anything. He could have written about anything, but the fact that he's choosing to write this ruminating passage on what's not happening, and then it is made much worse by the specific tone he uses. It doesn't look good if you read that. It's weird to not see Russell T Davies in big salesman showrunner mode.
That's the thing, isn't it? When they started this, there was that picture, on one of the walls in Bad Wolf Studio, they painted the whole thing the home of the Hooniverse with a big picture of Shooty there in massive letters. And it's in all the classic tragedies, pride comes before the fall, isn't it? It's with that much kind of investment and kind of that much at stake, it's it was begging for this kind of emptiness and kind of suspense to not be the narrative. It needed to smash it right out of the gate and be the most obvious, stupendous success from day one, imaginable. So to not have that means you get the kind of this suspense and this dread almost instead. That's kind of where we're stuck.
In 2 months from then, in his another letter from the showrunner to the magazine, Russell opened with, "Here we go, hissing and clanking and sparking down the tracks. Season 2 is on its way, or season 15, or season 41 of the entire show. All these titles are true. Bear in mind, last year's transmission began on 11th of May, which means from that 11th May to this year's 11th May, you'll have had 14 new episodes of Doctor Who with 1 year, just like you got way back in 2005.
Oh dear. That's, yeah.
It's very desperate.
Yes, we got that many episodes within 1 year in 2005. And then the next year, we also got roughly the same number of episodes in that year. So it's really not about the time proximity. It's about the amount overall, you see? So it's to even do something. Yeah, I don't need to explain this. Yeah, it sounds bad.
The thing that gets me about it is that it sounds like the kind of thing a diehard RTD supporter would be saying on Twitter. Actually, we got this many episodes last year, actually, so it's one thing for fans to be saying that, but to hear it from the mouth of the person in charge, actually, we're not doing too bad, does not inspire confidence.
That reminds me, kind of on the flip side of that, Russell being weirdly overt or honest was when he was talking about the ratings. This is a while ago now for season 1. He said, "In coming back, I wanted to make it simpler and I wanted to make it younger. Those two things are often not discussed. You read reactions to it and people are missing that. It's simpler and younger and it's working. The under 16s and the 16 to 34-year-old audience as well is massive. It's not doing that well in the ratings, but is doing phenomenally well with the younger audience that we wanted." It just feels huge for Russell T Davies to be yes, it's not, the ratings aren't that good. And of course he points out like, that is interesting about the audience, and he spins it well enough. But yeah, it's just, this is so weird. When he came back, it was all, I'm needed. This is the future. It was all just like a huge, there was just such a celebration. It wasn't even celebration, pride. Like Gig said, it was pride, wasn't it? So and yes, like Gig said, I guess it feels tragic now that it feels like we're potentially coming to a fall. Although for all we know, the 26 episodes transmit and Disney say, yes, okay, more of The War Between, or maybe more of Doctor Who as well. I think it would be the funniest possible outcome for this all just to be stretched out, and then for Disney to be like, yeah, okay, give us some more. It would feel like a lot of, Sound and Fury for nothing then, wouldn't it? Or this kind of dark air about the show now. But we'll see.
I do wonder almost at this point, is it going to be that thing that fans always say? Like, is it actually going to be where the dark aura that everyone's kind of creating around it kind of influences Disney to like drop it? I don't know, I'm not getting very good vibes about this. I think we should just leave it. I wonder if it'll actually be that thing that you've talked too negatively about the show and you actually killed it, it's all your fault. If it's actually real this time, that would be kind of funny.
I think this is why people freak out at stuff like the Sun articles being like, Shooty's leaving and all this is happening and blah, blah, blah. Because they do actually, even if they don't in themselves have an impact, everyone's going to react to them. And that has an impact. And then they'll make more articles saying more things. And it's like a big boulder, and it starts accumulating, to use Shooty's words. It accumulates more. I don't know how this metaphor is working. It gets bigger as it rolls down.
Snowballs.
The last thing I wanted to, so we discussed the Robot Revolution, and then we've kind of discussed this weird vibe around season 2. The last thing I want to discuss, and Missy may leave us for this. I'll ask Missy as I say this. Way back in the end of the Chibnall era and the start of the 60th, we talked about leaks. There's always leaks for everything. There's a million leaks for everything, and most of them are crap and wrong. We talked about leaks back in those days that came out nearly entirely true, I'm pretty sure. There's a lot of leaks for season 2 that are going around. And we won't know until the next 7 episodes have all transmitted. But I basically believe these ones. Or at least I believe the people who are saying believe these ones. And they are very discussable. So I want to discuss them at least, because I know Gig has also read at least some of them. But Missy, I know you're you care more about the show than Gig and I do. So sometimes you prefer to preserve your experience more. So I don't know. Do you want to depart? Do you want to stay? How do you want to handle this? Because I'm going to talk through them now.
Yeah, I really do want to stay because I know that they are very juicy leaks and it'll be a very fun discussion. But I do want to preserve the little bit of surprise that I have for the sake of the show. So I think I will decide to depart now. Yeah, so I will be taking my leave now.
All right. Thank you, Missy.
Thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, it was fun. Good to talk to you guys. Okay, have fun with the leak stuff. Bye.
So these season 2 leaks, they kind of, they leaked, that's the word, isn't it? They kind of emanated it out slowly for a while. And a lot of people, including myself, weren't paying them that much mind. But just like before with the 60th and the centenary, there's when someone who gets pretty much everything right says, this is all right, that's what I pay attention to more than anything else. And that's my understanding of these ones. So if they don't come true, then Gig and I will have had an absurd discussion, and at least we would have had a fun thought experiment about something that could happen. And if they do come true, I just feel like there's some value to like capturing in time these kind of moments where some fans are expecting something before we fully know it's going to happen or not. That just sounds like I'm describing how television works. You get what I mean, Gig. It's interesting to preserve the kind of leak discussion, I think.
Yeah, because lots of people are sort of reading these and talking about these and expecting this to come true. So yeah, you might as well go into it.
So in February, a lot of talk from like social media accounts that cover the filming of the show and stuff like that, not in an official capacity, like the people who like watching sets and stuff like that. We're talking a lot about, it seems there were some pickup material for season 2 happening, so like more shooting after the season had finished being shot. And there was this kind of vibe around, this whispery vibe of like, they're shooting more right now than is normal. Like they're doing a lot more shooting now. And between that and the Sun reporting Shooty's leaving and he's going off to Los Angeles and everything, the idea was that like how Jodie's era was originally going to end with just Jodie regenerating on that beautiful land formation and then it like cuts to black or whatever and we don't know who she regenerated into before Russell and Tennant took it over and did all that. The idea was season 2 is or was going to end that way with Shooty because of this weird limbo we're in with Disney not re-upping the deal yet and Shooty being a rising star, he presumably wants to go off and do other things. So before the big season 2 leaks came out a bit later, that was kind of the vibe in February. How did you feel about all that as that was happening, Gig?
On one hand, like Shooty leaving or regenerating or whatever, you know what? I was slightly in denial that they'd actually do the kind of the perspective chib thing of just having a regeneration cliffhanger and just cut dead like while he's regenerating and just have no, because it makes me ask like why. Like, why on earth, like, why even bother? Like, if you don't have a new Doctor, why do the regeneration at all? Why kind of foreclose on, like, this character? Why sort of cut off any possibility of doing it properly later on? Like, what's the point? Wouldn't it be so awkward to pick back up with, like, a new Doctor? It just seems to make life so difficult for no real reason. But I guess there's some impulse to have, I guess closure. Maybe more closure if you just show him dying, even if you don't show, like, what happens next. And I guess it's like a way of just firmly saying, we're not going to have the current Doctor back for like a special where he regenerates or anything like that. We're actually just going to say, this is it. It's over. Even if it means we just cut the show off at a really awkward, abrupt point and really embarrassing point. So, I didn't want to believe it, but I guess it's believable, I suppose.
Around the end of February, the Mirror, and this is really the warning sign because the writer of this article, Nicola Methan, her track record, as we would know from following New Who forever, it's very, very good. Her track record.
I remember like the Davros stuff from like 2015, like 10 years ago now, you know, that's a long track record of getting leaks right.
Yeah. And she was reporting things about the series hasn't been renewed. The Disney deal is, the vibe is weird. Everyone is preparing for the worst, was a quote in that article. So it felt like, the worst may be coming to happen. Anyway, the Sun kept printing stuff like this about the show ending. And of course, the tabloids play up like the whole black, gay, all that angle more. And I think that's actually why the leaks I'm about to read out, I think that's why I think some fans ignored them for a while, is because I think it's easy for fans to kind of be like, oh, fuck the Sun, you know, they're having a go at woke Doctor Who or whatever. And also to kind of conflate that fuck the Sun thing into, and they're wrong. And also, like, if someone's leaking something, oh, this guy seems like a chud or something, therefore what he's saying is wrong.
Yeah.
Of course, the issue is it's possible that the Sun, of course, is complete trash and it's correct about something, or that a leaker is a chud or whatever, but he's also correct about something, is also what can happen.
If someone clearly has an agenda, then that kind of gives people like a way in to believe that they're making stuff up, to kind of harm the show, or like spinning a tale to kind of undermine the show, because they've already decided politically that they're against the show and what the show is doing. So that's a good excuse to kind of like, well, he must be lying. You know?
Yeah. But before I get to that leaker, just moving forward through the year again, through February, March, Russell talking to Tennant on his podcast says, there was already a move from the BBC to shift Doctor Who to a streamer. I kind of thought it would need protecting, and they very honestly said that to me. We're going to need a producer who can deal with 1,000 executives, which is what it's like. Davies said, when he's asked, like, why does the BBC feel the show needed all this, like, streamer money, Davies said that's what they wanted. He talks about Piers Wenger, you know, from the BBC, thought the show deserved that budget. It deserves a Stranger Things, Star Wars budget. It deserves to look like that. It sounds to me like the BBC were going to do this one way or another. They were going to try this. If Chibnall's leaving them, they're going to try it with someone else. And Russell, I guess rightfully, thought it's got to be me, because any journeyman they get in or showrunner with less experience is going to struggle more, and the show is going to suffer more unless there's a big, strong, very tall man to to assert himself to the Americans, I guess. It's just a complete thought experiment. I have no idea. What if a quote-unquote weaker showrunner was in Russell's position? What would have happened? It's impossible to know, I guess.
Yeah, I guess like you could sort of guess kind of like what general vibe would it be. I mean, certainly maybe if someone like who's more susceptible to kind of like the whims and like the pressures of this, or to make something more acceptable or something more kind of safe, whatever, you'd have less like kind of RTD's iconic, searing, bold vision in the show, certainly. And maybe something a bit more sort of normal. I don't know. It's just a pure thought experiment, like you say. We can't really know. And, you can't assume that someone else they'd get in would have just had no creativity of their own. Or that, like, whatever Disney notes would have come in would have been, like, horrendous, terrible ones, or whatever. But again, I can expect it might have been something a bit less weird than RTE2 has been in several key ways.
Yeah. Anyway, so these big leaks themselves came in the form of YouTube comments, which is another reason I think so many people dismiss them to start with, because, like, that's it's not really where you expect real leaks to come from. Anyway, I think these are true because of people saying, take these seriously. We could split hairs over the timelines of, he said this, and then the teaser for the episode had this in it, which made it look like this is true, or he said this about the Belinda intro episode before it happened, blah, blah, blah. We could do all that, but I think rather than, spend 10 minutes doing that, let's just start reading them out. So, what did he have to say? The plot, but he meant the plot. The plot of episode 1 is definitely a rehash of the abandoned RTD Christmas special, which became Joy to the World. Except the planet is called Belinda Chandra World, and the villain and creator of the robots is her ex-boyfriend, who when they were teenagers gave a certificate gifting to her a random star in the night sky, which happens to be this planet. Yeah, that came true. What's another thing he said? Episode 3 is a sequel to Midnight. That is... I've been following, in the weeks since then, like the press for season 2. I believe that 1000% with how the episode is being talked about. Just, when you can kind of read this, I'm going to sound so stupid if I'm wrong. When you can kind of pick up on the subtext of what people are talking about. The way episode 3 is getting talked about in terms of surprises and horror and stuff like that, I fully believe this Midnight sequel thing. And I don't like that because that's...
You've also got that little teaser video announcing the title with a clock that switches to midnight.
Yeah.
And you've also apparently RTD said you've got an unexpected sequel coming up. It's like, yeah, okay, whatever. I don't like it either. I think it's just really just what the fuck is the point? I really don't know. It just seems like one of those things where you're... it's funny it's called The Well, because it really is returning to the well. You're sort of draining the well dry.
Yeah.
You take the one episode where kind of the inscrutability and kind of uniqueness of it is kind of half the point. And you just go, you know what? Remember that. We're going to do that again, just so we can have a moment where the whole audience just goes like, oh my God, I remember that episode. I remember when the show had good episodes like that in it. Wow. Thank you so much for referencing that good story again. Thank you, RTD. I'm so entertained. Yeah. I don't think it's like, it's not that this means the episode will be bad or terrible. It's just like a lame thing to do. I feel like it's probably going to turn out you could probably do whatever the story is, you could probably do the exact same way without trying to claim it's a sequel to Midnight. Just set it on some other planet, just call the monster something else, and have it be otherwise identical. There's just no point. It's just a cheap kind of self-cannibalizing kind of thing, where we just kind of use up and chew up the unique kind of distinctive things about the show and its history.
Midnight just feels very like, that's obviously an episode that a lot of the idea of it is how self-contained it is, and that we don't. But whatever, I'm open to it, I guess.
I'm not.
Horror sequels, I think, are hard, but I'll judge The Well when we get to The Well. The next comment by this guy is, I don't know what to say or how to respond to it. So what he says is, Mrs. Flood is a bi-generation of the Rani who reappears at the end of episode 6 and is in episodes 7 and 8. Bi-generation being back, that's interesting. The Rani being back, that's...
To be honest, bi-generation happening to another Time Lord doesn't really surprise me that much. Obviously, it's a bit lame to kind of be reusing, especially when the whole point of that was supposedly to try and make her change the rules or whatever. But again, if you've established that this is a new universe where all the wild and wacky things can happen, then okay, whatever, fine, have another Time Lord bifurcate. But yeah, the Rani, like, why? Just why? It feels something about this feels self-satisfied, self-congratulatory in a way that only sort of classic Who wankers can like understand or appreciate or care about. It does feel like a renunciation of the task of appealing to people or audiences or doing anything cool with the show at all, in favor of just kind of, again, like self-cannibalization, just turning in on yourself and just sort of like greedily sort of slopping up every last bit of kind of crap ephemera from the show just because you can. So I don't have high hopes for that, and just seem like a dereliction of duty, maybe is the word I'm looking for. And even just like how Mrs. Flood is kind of being handled so far, and the way she was like in season 1 finale, she was like, "I will seize your empire of gold," or whatever it was she said. I was like, is this supposed to be the Rani? When was she like this? I don't know. It's something so fetishistic about it, and it just reminds me of whole Chibnall solving Morbius doctors in Time of the Children. It's like, why this? Why are these weird paraphilic like associations with like 80s stuff and classic Who stuff? Why are they allowed to become? Why are they getting expressed in this massive like millions and millions of dollars canvas? Like, why are people's careers, like, why is Shooty's career being, like, used up on this stuff? Who could be happy with this or give a fuck about this? Like, I feel like bizarre kind of 80s wankfests shouldn't even have young people in them. Like, I just feel like these weird kind of pursuits, like, we shouldn't be exposed to them. This is what you should be doing in, like, in Davison's, like, Five-ish Doctors thing, there's that scene of Moffat playing with his action figures. Yeah, I feel like that, this is where that should be confined to. You should not actually get millions of dollars to make this on Disney Plus, in my opinion.
It's funny you mentioned young people. His next comment, which I presume is in relation to someone asking about the two Ranis, is she is a young actress of Asian heritage, but I'm afraid I don't know her name. So I guess Anita Dobson is one Rani, and then there's a Asian actress, which is the other Rani. That could be interesting.
I haven't like read this guy's comments in full. I was kind of assuming that like the other one would turn out to be Belinda or something. Like Belinda was the other. I guess that doesn't make sense, so that's probably not going to be the case, which is a relief, I suppose. I wouldn't like Belinda to be a Rani by generation or a bloody Time Lord or anything remotely like that. But okay. I mean, again, almost like if it's actually that Mrs. Flood is one Rani and then we're introducing another additional Rani, so there can be two in the story at the same time. It's just like we're just how convoluted and overstuffed can we make this story? I just feel like there's no way this can turn out very well. Like, got like bring back one Rani is bad enough, but like two, it's like, God, who wants this multi-Rani story?
I wonder. I know Juno Dawson has talked about the Rani before, and so for the Rani, when he says reappears at the end of episode 6, I assume the reveal that Mrs. Flood is the Rani is in episode 6 then, which I could see Juno Dawson enjoying. So maybe like that's 3 episodes of Rani-ing. So anyway, he talks more about The Well, the Midnight sequel elsewhere. He says it's quite a creepy, atmospheric episode, lots of tension set in an underground base on a remote planet. It's one with this deaf actress in it, and the fact that her character, who is deaf and cannot easily communicate, has been possessed by the midnight creature is integral to the plot. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I guess,
like the midnight creature, I get the idea there.
Iterating on it.
I read in Doctor Who magazine, though, that the character wasn't written to be deaf initially. In casting, it came up, the idea to use that actress. So
okay, that's slightly less compelling then. If it wasn't actually the idea in the script, it was just kind of tacked on kind of retroactively, okay, maybe it's, I don't know. I mean, it might still be an improvement, but yeah, I don't know.
Someone asks him, isn't it convenient you know what happens in first half, but not the finale? And this guy says, They haven't done the final edit of the episode yet. I think they are leaving it as late as possible to decide which ending to use, presumably the shooty stuff. He talks about not liking the episode 5, the story in the engine, which is the one I'm most excited for this year. A new writer, and it just everything Russell said about this episode makes it sound like it's very outside the mold of the show. And he's talked about how the writer was doing things and Russell was like, I'm just going to sit back and let him do it because that's part of, opening the show up to, new creativity and stuff. Anyway, the commenter talks about it's the first episode with an entirely non-white cast, and he doesn't find the story or the characters engaging. And there's a CGI spider and stuff like that. It's not much of a leak, I guess that's more his opinions, but...
No, not really. I'm okay. If there's no plot leaks for that, then good. Good. I'd like to experience that one properly.
Yeah. Here's an interesting leak for the next episode, Lux, the cartoon one. He says, there are some scenes in episode 2 which some fans may not like, with a trio of Doctor Who fans wearing a scarf, fez, etc., reviewing the episode from a sofa.
That sounds like it's going to be painful, to be honest.
It reminds me of, in Resolution that we'll have to have a conversation scene.
Yeah, like that, but kind of inflected with sort of the, showrunner kind of poking fun at. Yeah, at the end of the day, it's like this is Doctor Who fans kind of making it about themselves again and kind of just like dwelling on themselves. Like I can't think of anyone I want Doctor Who to be about less than Doctor Who fans. So kind of incorporating them into an episode, I don't think that's something that's going to make me very happy.
He is good at making fun of fans, though. Do you remember that letter where he eviscerated how fans think through watching episodes? So I've kind of hoped for that. Yeah.
I liked that, but I feel like turning it around and actually putting the fans in an episode is almost being too nice to them. Almost like even just the fact of doing that is like giving them undue importance. I feel like writing a funny little column in Doctor Who magazine is one thing, but it's like actually doing fourth wall breaks in your episodes to fucking talk about fandom. It's like, oh no, now you've actually infected the source text. I don't support this.
Elsewhere, he says episode 6 is quite camp but fun and has a few cameo appearances in it, including a hologram Graham Norton. That's since been press released, so that's come true. He says episode 7 looks quite interesting, a bit Truman Show, and features the return of 2 classic villains and 2 classic companions. Hopefully RTD won't cock it all up with episode 8 like last year.
And I assume one of the classic companions is Mel, because she was in the trailer, wasn't she?
Mel and Susan? Who's the other?
I don't know.
I guess it would have to be... I can't think who else it would be, unless the Stephen Cow thing comes into action after all.
Oh yeah, the ruminants, yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
He says elsewhere the Daleks definitely don't appear this series.
Good.
The futuristic scenes in the trailer are actually of Belinda Chandra World.
I kind of like having a whole era with no Daleks in it.
Yeah, so do I. Yeah.
It's not like I have anything against them specifically, but it's just like it's been so... And there was that whole kind of orthodoxy about how Daleks must be every year. There's that urban legend about it being mandated. And it's nice to have that firmly proven wrong. You actually can, well, I say you can do the show without Daleks. It might be about to get cancelled, but you can make the show. You don't have to. You can actually just... I like that it makes this era a bit distinctive. That it's not doing the same old shitty villains.
It makes the show feel bigger as well, I think.
Yes.
He says at the beginning of episode 7... She, I think by she he means the bi-generated bi-generated Rani. She is seen riding on horseback through a forest in Hungary. Later on in the episode, Mrs. Flood is revealed as her bi-generation spin-off, and then she starts babbling about Omega, who I presume turns up in the final episode.
Right. Okay. I think the pivotal point in my whole feelings about this era was kind of the finale of season 1 and how all that Sutekh shit was not only introduced but handled. And it's just like, well, I can't feel anything if you say Omega is going to be in it at this point, because we know how the sort of thing is handled. We know how just crappily Sutekh was handled and written. We know how underwhelming this whole big CGI villain god thing, whatever, popping up is. So I really don't care at this point. It doesn't feel real to me. It doesn't matter to me. Like, I'm not, like, gulled by kind of the jangling keys of saying, like, oh, a big, really dangerous classic Who villain is going to come back. Like, it means nothing to me. It really, really means nothing. If it was, like, Series 6, I remember back then, I feel like the church guys who showed up in Series 5 or 6 or whatever, their logo had, like, an Omega symbol in it. And I remember for the longest time, I was like, oh, maybe the big villain of the Moth Who is going to be Omega. And if it had happened back then, I'd have been kind of interested. Because I had some expectation that there'd be emotional stakes involved. There'd be, we get episodes like, Hellbent or Heaven Sent out of it. Something like that could happen. I don't have those expectations at this point. So again, it's completely meaningless to me.
So, Rani and Omega, Time Lords, Rani, evil scientist, Omega, like crazy civilization founder. I think Omega is more interesting of the two. I think his presence in actual stories has been more interesting. The Rani, it's been a long time since I watched her serials. I didn't enjoy them when I did watch them. I'll have to rewatch them before Eurovision, I guess. But I don't like this kind of... Remember how the Centenary had all these villains together, like we jam them all together? It's like the Moffat action figures things, like you mentioned. I don't like the idea of lots of villains together for that reason, basically.
No, it's crap. It was crap when Chib did it, and I think he did it out of the lack of any actual story ideas. I think this idea if you just put more than one thing on top of each other, it makes a more interesting story. It doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. I feel like Big Finish does this sometimes as well. Like if we just combine all these things. But Chib did it in a very obvious way. He kept talking about how his big idea for Jodie's final episode was to have the Master, the Cybermen, and the Daleks all at the same time. Wouldn't it be epic if the Doctor had to fight all three of those at once? It's like, no. What part of Doctor Who has ever suggested that having the Doctor juggling multiple villains somehow makes the story more interesting? All that happens is the characters have to flip back and forth between different scenarios, or one villain leaves one scene, different villain comes in another scene. It's just choking out the room in the story for it to be about anything else, anything more interesting. The essence of Doctor Who is does not entirely revolve around how many baddies you can fight. Kind of the fighting baddies is maybe one part of it, and then you also have other things happening. You have humour, comedy, character, pathos, tragedy. There's all sorts of other things going on in the show. Good dialogue. It's not all about having CGI fights with bloody... this impulse to just pile on more villains on top of each other and have an unholy trinity of bad guys for the Doctor to fight to make it more epic. Actually, I feel like in practice it just turns all the individual antagonists into it slurs them together. It makes them... It denies room for them to actually be distinctive. I think having one really powerful antagonist is a lot more... I just feel it gives you a lot more room to make it really good, and you can achieve something a lot more profound than you can with juggling three separate antagonists just for the sake of doing it. Unless you have a really bloody good reason to have them all together in one story, which I doubt in this case.
He kind of talks to their connection. Someone asks the leak guy, will the Rani or Omega team up, or will they be at odds with each other? And he says, more likely the former. In episode 7, the Rani heralds his coming, which is in episode 8.
This whole, I herald his coming. You remember Harriet Arbinger in this season 1 finale? And she's the greatest god of all is coming. It's like, what? For one hand, the Rani's supposed to be a scientist, right? So it just feels like for her to be writing her about, I herald the coming of the Grand Master of all. What? It just feels like we're erasing all the things that actually made these characters distinctive and just slopping them together into, I guess, the vague, generic tone that we want, which is the god of all gods, mythos. Just hitting the mythos button. We want this to have mythos vibes. So we're going to have every character talking a mythic register. Just relentlessly. Yeah, it sounds bad. It's sounding worse and worse, okay?
He says there is an actual scene. He says there's an exposition scene. I think he's misspeaking, and he means because that does make sense. But he says there's an exposition scene where we see Mrs. Flood actually splitting off from the Rani in response to someone asking, do we actually see this, or is it just in dialogue? I think he's misused the word exposition, and he means we actually see it on screen. But yeah, so that'll be... We see Mrs. Flood splitting off from the Rani. So is the Asian Rani the the tenant.
Yeah, she's the tenant in this analogy.
And Mrs. Flood's the shooty. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting. He says the finale does seem to take place inside a TV reality show, Wish World.
Yeah, fun idea. Yeah, why not? It's just shame about everything else.
And this is my favorite thing he said of everything. Okay. And this is regarding the finale. The Rani and Mrs. Flood are trying to summon Omega from the Underverse. Basically, Omega is now a horrible big CGI monster with a giant claw, voiced by someone who sounds a bit like Gabriel Wolf, Sutekh.
Kind of sounds like just Sutekh again, if I'm honest. You know, giant monster. I mean, obviously, Sutekh had like a big mouth and like a snout rather than a claw, but, you know, again, he was a big perching CGI entity. I remember, I think RCD showed off the sketches he did, the initial sketches he did of what he wanted Sutekh to look like, perching on the TARDIS, this big monster thing. Sounds like he may have done that again, just drawn a giant claw in there, just for reasons. I don't know, I mean, God knows what the actual design of this thing is going to be. But, again, it just, I don't know. I mean, I'm not some, like, big lover of Omega's, like, original designs in, like, the classic Who. I mean, memorable, certainly, but, you know, just a guy in a mask at the end of the day. So I'm not saying this is some huge improvement, but, I don't know. I just feel like what my actual issue here is that I don't have high expectations for how this character is going to be written. I think it's just, I feel like we're just going to have another pretty good and memorable character from Classic Who, written as yet another big, evil CGI blob who wants evil stuff to happen because he's really evil. And yeah, it's sounding boring and crap in lots of ways. And again, I don't know why a claw.
Omega, I kind of like the visuals of him are so, you know, very ostentatious. And then his actual vocal performance is like, I don't know, I feel like he's more interesting than he looks. But yeah, with Sutekh, you know, we glazed up heaps. And then he came across as, big CGI angry dog thing. So I'm not expecting much there. The Rani, I'll have to rewatch Mark and Time of the Rani. I didn't like that character and I didn't think there was much meat on that bone. But I know a lot of people really defend her like, oh, evil scientist. It's actually really interesting. And maybe they're right. I would actually have more faith in Russell to write the Rani well than Omega. I just feel like that's more... I feel like big... maniacal Time Lord, he would just go into camp autopilot mode. I feel like camp woman scientist is maybe a little more in his wheelhouse of able to do well, but we'll see.
Yeah, see, I agree, but I feel like the whole presence of she's heralding, she's trying to summon the great dark god Omega, or whatever, I feel like that's going to undermine whatever would be otherwise good about an RTD take on the Rani. And it's like RTD can write characters, but I just feel like if we've kind of committed to this whole pantheon thing, that's just going to end up with him not really doing it. So yeah, I'm not confident.
Our guy says of the finale, he definitely regenerates at the end of the episode, although you don't see who he regenerates into. He also says the Doctor doesn't face a Dalek in the season, so in his run, he doesn't face the Cybermen or the Master. Only the Rani and Omega in the finale, but there's a clip from Day of the Daleks in the finale for some reason.
Wait, Day of the...
Yeah, it's Day. So...
What? What's the mythic significance of that story in particular? I mean, what?
No idea.
Could this guy have actually mixed up the classic Who story he's citing here? Is it because there are a lot of the Daleks stories? I feel like maybe it's a different one.
It's very possible.
I don't know. Unless like the Ogrons are going to be some huge, or like Dalekanium or something. I don't know.
He says the finale's a bit of a mess, and what they have done to Omega, who is recreated as a CGI monster with a giant claw, is worse than what they did to Sutekh last season. And in my view is unforgivable.
Oh, God.
But if you were a fan of Space Babies, you'll love another returning character.
Right. Oh yeah, we've heard about that, haven't we? I think
Captain Poppy. There's been rumors for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that'll be just great.
The final big leak is, and it's just the perfect capstone to all of this, I think, in so many ways. So someone asks, any idea what causes the Doctor to regenerate? Just hoping it doesn't feel like obvious rewrites and reshoots, lol. And our leaker says, no, really, very clear. I assume he meant not really very clear. He just goes off and does it. For no their reason, seemingly, than the fact that it's the end of the season and he's not coming back from another one. It does feel a bit tagged on, I assume, which obviously is. And this is the final thing he has to say from what I have seen. He says, another doctor comes back to help him on his way, but probably not the one you might have been hoping for.
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah, I feel like this is the other thing that we've heard about, isn't it? I feel like that's... Yeah. Yeah, I think I know who he's talking about.
Given this guy's views, I don't think he'd be talking about Tennant or Matt or Capaldi, and there's no way it's Eccleston. So I assume she's back.
There's something... Okay, the Doctor sees someone when they're regenerating. The Doctor has a vision of someone. Yeah, that's been happening before. It's not really the practice for it to be another version of himself. So I feel like if the Doctor's kind of spirit guide, in this case, in regeneration, is like a previous incarnation of the Doctor, that kind of says something maybe not great about kind of the relationships or the character journey that the Doctor has gone on, that this Doctor has gone on in his era. If that's all you can kind of pull out for the final moment, is another bloody Doctor cameo. It's like, what? Like, what? I mean, if it's like, it's just, again, it feels like this whole turning inward, like self-cannibalizing, just like scraping the barrel. Like, we don't have actual real things to offer here. So we got continuity, we got cameos, that's what we got. And, we've got more Doctors to kind of shovel at you. It just feels like a real, like, it just feels, again, a bit creatively bankrupt. That's the nicest way I can possibly put it.
I feel like we complained about this so much with the Centenary, but you look on YouTube, like the Regeneration compilation videos. Regeneration is such an institution unto itself now. I really don't like that. And I think it like robs the potential of how you can do I mean, the whole idea of having this regeneration that goes nowhere in itself is kind of strange, and it's part of why, like, people expect to get regenerations like this. I don't like the idea of Doctors helping other Doctors with regenerations, just because it feels to me just like we're just throwing big monuments at regenerations because it's like a big TV moment. And so, like in the Centenary, we had the Guardians of the Edge and the stuff. It feels like it's cart horse mix up to me. Basically, we're throwing Doctors around to help Doctors around. Obviously, like I love in Androzani, the weird way we have kind of two Doctors to do there. And there's like ways it's worked before, but I just don't like the idea of, it's like the 3 villain thing, isn't it? We just need lots of things in the regeneration to make it feel epic. I mean, we haven't seen it. For all we know, it's an incredibly touching, brilliant scene, but the idea makes me roll my eyes a little bit. Not specifically that it's Jodie, just that it's like, do we really need... I would have rolled my eyes at Tennant, or Matt would have been bizarre. Anyway, but there is another leak actually about another Doctor besides 15 and 13 in the season. The leaker says Jo Martin pops up briefly in one episode, and so does Susan in episode 7.
See, Jo Martin coming back, that's like the one thing that I kind of like. I always thought if you have like the 2 Black Doctors together, that would be cool.
Yeah.
Even if that's incredibly superficial motivation for it to happen. I remember I saw a piece of fan art of both of them once. I was like, God, that would be so cool. Because I loved the whole idea with like Jo Martin. I loved like her outfit. I loved her kind of brusque personality. I love just everything about that. Like I wished I could take that out of Chib's horrible kind of the Division lore dump and just make her like an independent Doctor by herself. And for her to interact with shooting anyway, that'd be wonderful. So I think that would be cool. It's a great idea. Why not? Go ahead. Take this Chib thing and give it some more redeemable gloss. Fine. I'd be very happy with that.
What about Susan?
Again, it's like I'm not against like doing like a Susan story. I just have no hope or confidence for it to be done very well. I just like, well, we just don't seem to be able to commit. I just feel like there's just so much noise and sound and fury happening like in this version of the show, and I just don't have confidence in like the kind of character stuff you'd need to make that really good and really worth doing. I just don't I just don't believe it's going to work in the way that I want it to.
His final comments that I can see on the finale are, in the classic series, Omega was a three-dimensional character whose plight you could understand his predicament, why he felt betrayed and abandoned by the Time Lords, why he craved existed. I'm not misspeaking, I'm just reading out verbatim. In this universe, and why, if he couldn't get it, he tried to destroy it. Now he is realized as a huge CGI raging monster with giant claws and no real character at all. A huge letdown. I can't really help you much with he plot, as I couldn't follow most of it, but Poppy from Space Babies is back, as is Anita from Joy to the World. And the Rani and her sidekick Mrs. Flood are trying to release Omega from the Underverse, which has a portal similar to the symbol on Omega's chest in Arc of Infinity.
It's like Anita from Joy to the World. That was at least a thing specific to 15, right? That was someone who he met and who he had the whole thing with. That was like a memorable like moment of warmth and like compassion and pathos from 15's run. She feels like a more natural fit for like his big final concluding story than say like a previous Doctor, like 13.
Yeah.
Frankly, even Tennant showing up would make more sense for 15 because 15 has met Tennant and like hugged Tennant at one point. Like they were part of the same story. Compared to, like 13 or like 12 or 11 showing up for 15. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, just on the face of it, I think if you're killing off like a Doctor, if this is the Doctor's like final story where they're basically dying and regenerating to someone else, I feel like that story should be for them. It should be like about them, I guess. I feel like it should be their own. And you shouldn't really like dilute it with like making it about like another Doctor's big bloody cameo. It just feels like cheapening the whole thing. Which I guess you could accuse Twice Upon a Time of being that, actually, couldn't you? But I guess William Hartnell was not actually back from the grave to be in that story, so I guess that kind of weakened. It was a different version. It was someone else playing a version of the First Doctor there, so I guess that kind of waters that down a little bit. Not that I'm a fan of Twice Upon a Time in particular, but
The sidekick phrasing is interesting. That Rani and her sidekick Mrs. Flood. So I guess the Asian Rani is, Tennant, and Mrs. Flood is Shooty, if she's the sidekick.
Yeah, I guess they're both the Rani and they're working with each other, I guess. The two Ranis joining forces to be the same character, I guess, in slightly different forms. I feel like if we try to then look back at Mrs. Flood throughout the show and be like, how is this justified by what we've learned in this finale, it's probably not going to be super coherent. Why was she here? Why was she hanging around Ruby? Why was she hanging around Belinda? Like, who knows? Who cares? Just like with Susan Twist in season 1, the answer was not enormously consequential or satisfying. I think we can expect similar levels of value this year as well. I think like one thing with the whole Rani Omega thing, it's like because just sort of invoking classic Who villains for sort of mythos purposes, it just feels like exactly the wrong thing to be doing now in this version of the show. It really is just like the absolute worst choice you could be making. Because if you wanted this to be a big success, a big memorable success, if you wanted this to be like a new version of the show for a new generation, like you would want to at least like go some way towards having new memorable antagonists or just like things that this version of the show can call its own. So things that building out the current version of the show and its world and its antagonists, just having things that people can say, people can remember as unique to this version, and not just like we were constantly banging the mythos drum. We were constantly just trying to hit the mythos button. And even like with RTD's whole ethos of supposedly making the show more ambitious, more creative, more mad, I feel like this is the opposite. And the same is true of Sutekh. I feel like doing this whole, we're going to do a Pyramids of Mars sequel, we're going to do a Omega return and the Rani return. I'm sure like when he justifies this to himself, he's like, oh, wouldn't it be mad and crazy and controversial to have the Rani and Omega come back? But it feels like the opposite to me. I think this is actually quite uncreative. I feel like just doing this whole constant like classic villain sort of bonanza is actually I feel like it's the opposite of creativity, because it's just you're doing the loudest noise you can possibly make just because you can, instead of actually writing a genuinely new story. It's weird. I feel like it's something that is pretending to be ambitious when it's actually as unambitious as it could possibly be. I feel like it's perverse in a way that it can be like this.
Yeah.
And there's certainly no interest in creating a show that's accessible to anyone here. Because who is meant to care Honestly, at this point, especially when you've had Sutekh as like a big CGI monster last year, and then you've got another big CGI monster this year. You're not even reframing these classic villains in ways that new people can care about. You're just making them into nothings, really. Let's just say if Shooty wants to quit, I completely understand. This is basically what I can say about this.
Someone asks him, is Archie Punjabi the Rani? She got announced as playing a villain in season 2 and she's of Asian heritage. He says, yes, I think she could very well be. I haven't seen the end credits, but checking her profile online, she does look very much like the actress portraying the Rani in the episodes 6 to 8. And then he says he doesn't think Gallifrey is specifically mentioned in the episodes, or at least not in episode 7. I feel like the show had such a clean ending with the giggle. And then Church being the premiere was kind of weird because Christmas, episode 1, that's odd. And then it was like series 10 all over again, wasn't it? It starts off kind of like a fresh start, and then by the end we're doing Pyramids of Mars. We're having companions watch it on TV and Sutekh and everything. I feel like I don't like this guff of all this classic stuff being this would have felt weird in the Moffat era or RTD1. It's so weird now, like 60 years on, to be doing this sort of thing.
I suppose like a point of to kind of really establish like what it is that we're kind of talking about here. I guess we have to compare it to the Dr. Falls, like you mentioned, series 10, because that has 2 masters and the Mondasian Cybermen. Like on paper, that is everything I've just complained about, isn't it? But I think the Dr. Falls is a pretty good story, right? So like, why is it fine when Moff does it? I guess it's because like Missy, like as a character, she's been so established throughout Capaldi's era. So bringing in like, Sim Master is an opportunity to do stuff with Missy, new stuff with her, and kind of explore her in a way. And ultimately, she dies, doesn't she? It's kind of her ending there, and that kind of delves into kind of who the Master is as a character. Like it all comes back to character. There's no just as wanky as it is to have, oh my god, it's an RTD cameo. As wanky as it is to have, oh my god, it's Mondasian Cybermen. Nonetheless, Moffat is interested in like the horror of that version of the Cybermen and the idea that they're like hospital patients. He delves into that in a big way. I mean, he loves like creepy hospitals. That's one of his recurring themes. So it is committed, right? Like Moffat is really committed to every single one of those ideas. And he like, relishes them, and he's not just trying to make it as loud as he can. He actually does have specific like cool obsessions with the stuff, and I don't see that same commitment in like Sutekh with Empire of Death or whatever. I don't see any of that here, and I don't think it's going to come back in season 2 either.
It's all just about story, I suppose, and there's not. I guess inherently there isn't anything wrong with bringing the Rani, Omega, Susan back, but I would trust Moffat more with it because I've seen him do what sounds like a ridiculous fan wank premise and then actually spin a capital S story out of it. Yeah, like you're saying. I think Russell could. Like, I think he's a fantastic writer and certainly has the capability. I just don't think he's interested in doing so because he certainly didn't do it with Empire of Death. Or, in his writing in general on Doctor Who, it doesn't tend to be the huge lore-heavy classic wank episodes where he does super focused, interesting storytelling. Whereas Moffat is kind of better at threading that needle of how to get... Well, I don't know. Maybe it's an inspiration thing. I don't know where they come to with their ideas. But yeah, it might not be inherently wrong to bring classics... I mean, I love classic Who. There's nothing inherently wrong with bringing classic stuff back. CGI... big claw, Underverse, Omega by generated Rani crap just doesn't sound good.
I think it's because here RTD2 is kind of very self-consciously, or at least RTD as a writer himself has, adopted this mode of storytelling that we saw kind of throughout season 1, kind of again here in Robot Revolution with the whole time fracture, which is just sort of freewheeling. It feels like non-committal in some ways. Like sort of like Devil's Cord and how there's like no actual I mean, things just happen in that episode, right? And it's kind of like, well, embracing the idea that I can just write anything. And how in like, Empire of Death, I'm bringing death to death. just a total embrace of writing nonsense because you can, and kind of feeling almost like heroic for doing that, even though if it's not necessarily, even if it's actually undermining the extent to which you can make a story out of any of this. Just sort of saying, like, who cares when it comes to the story content. And I feel like that's just going to be corrosive to anything you try to put into the show at the end of the day.
I guess to kind of wind this up, actually the weirdest thing about this all to me isn't the CGI claw Omega or anything. And it's not the show like seemingly maybe falling away into nothingness, or at least the Doctor doing so after all the fanfare of Russell coming back. It's that, wait a minute, this Omega claw finale isn't the end. There's 5 more episodes after this. We still have that weird Sea Devil spinoff coming after all this.
I wonder what you were talking about then. Like 5 more episodes? What? And then the realization sunk in. Oh yeah, we still do have the fucking Sea Devils to come with Pete McTighe.
That is just so strange to think. Like what? Like Shooty leaves potentially, and then all this insanity with the Rani, 2 Ranis and Omega. All this happens, and then it might feel like the show is gone, and then we randomly get the
unit.
You'll Never Swim Alone Sea Devils
Kate
romance. It's just the oddest ending possible, which I guess is more interesting.
If that ends up being like the last Doctor Who thing produced on television for like a generation, that would be quite a way to go out. Let's just put it that way. I don't think it will be. I think, even if there's like some long sort of year or years long break, I think BBC will try to get the show back in some form. But it might be a while. So we might have to just subsist with one measly Sea Devils miniseries. And I mean, do you have high hopes for War Between? Because I just feel like the whole, as much as the idea of like a gritty miniseries about a unit facing a crisis sounds like it could be okay, if it's trying to do the whole sort of kid-friendly Children of Earth style thing, I do feel like making it, just the act of making it about the Sea Devils and getting like a classic Who wanker extraordinaire Pete McTighe to co-write it just doesn't bode hugely well for me. I don't know. What do you think?
I think the inevitable Russell interspecies romance will be funny and camp and very melodramatic, so that might be fun. My only I think this will be legitimately good thing is the director is great. Like 73 Yards looks like a great film, in its own right. So I think it'll probably look really good, the show. And we were talking about medium is the message with Robot Revolution, so maybe that's enough.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I forgot he was directing that, so that's quite exciting. Again, but the whole even just the premise of like a unit spin-off in any capacity, you just start to lose me. I think if you don't have, it's not like the unit characters are really very memorable or exciting presences within the main show. So you give them their own show, and I'm like, whatever. You're just doing it because it just seems like the obvious thing to do, and I don't know.
My dream is the season 2 does poorly as season 1 did, or whatever else, but the War Between really strikes a chord with the American audience or something, and it explodes. And Disney says, more of that, please. That's my dream. I think that would be
less of Doctor Who, just more seasons of Unit.
Yeah, they're the funniest situation that happened. So we'll see. But yeah, these leaks, they're very, very, very strange. And I guess let's rewatch Mark of the Rani and Time of the Rani sometime before Eurovision.
Yeah, don't bother rewatching the 3 Doctors, because it won't help. If Empire of Death is anything to go by, we're not even paying attention to the original characterization.
I love the 3 Doctors. It's probably, yes. I'll be less annoyed if I don't rewatch it. You're totally right. That's good advice. Sober advice.
I'm always wondering, would they do like a Tales of the TARDIS of 3 Doctors again, like a surprise one,
or Mark of the Rani,
or Mark of the Rani,
or Time of the Rani?
We could do both. Why not? Just re-add dimensions in time. There might be a more substantial Rani story than whatever we're about to get. I don't know.
That wraps us up for this Robot Revolution Series 2 vibes, Series 2 leaks discussion. I really got to stop saying series. Season 2, or 41, or however else Russell put it. Anyway, let us know what you thought of all that. Robot Revolution as an episode, the general vibes you have, and we all kind of have, as a community or not, around Season 2. And all these leaks, listeners, what do you think? We're having trouble processing it. Help us. How are you processing it? Do you not believe it at all? If you do believe it, if you entertain it as a thought experiment, what do you think of it? Let us know. I'm really, really, really curious how other people think about all this. So please actually let us know. And yeah, let's hope Lux is fantastic and the rest of the season goes swimmingly. Thanks for listening.